Chapter 1052. For a long time, Wang Xingxiao's image in Li Tianlan's heart had been relatively vague. The so-called vague did not mean that it was unclear, but that it had many faces. More importantly, the two of them were actually not familiar with each other. In Li Tianlan's heart, Wang Xingxiao was a very tough person. He also looked very gentle, but he was not easy to compromise. He was also a very persistent and firm person. The young generation of Jianghu state before Li Tianlan appeared was the era of Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanzhan. At that time Wang Xingxiao was low-key calm. The young generation of Jianghu state after Li Tianlan appeared was the era of Li Tianlan. Everyone watched Li Tianlan leave everyone, including Wang Xingxiao, far behind. The youngest combat capability of the Invincible Realm. His opponents were the famous Invincible Realm experts in the Dark World. They were the symbols on the divine and holy lists, Li Guangtu and Wang Tianzong. Wang Xingxiao changed from a leader to a chaser. He still stayed still and silently chased after Li Tianlan. He was surpassed by Li Tianlan. He was surpassed by Jianghu. Gu Hanzhan, who used to be as famous as Wang Tianzong, had already fallen at a speed that was enough to stun people. Even if the young master of Kunlun City was a genius with the Heavenly King heart, Gu Hanzhan did not make any progress in the nearly 3 years since he was defeated by Li Tianlan in the maneuver of the two academies. Instead, his realm regressed. What about Wang Xingxiao? He was still making progress silently. His mentality was not affected at all. He was stable, peaceful, and persistent. He cultivated his own martial arts and silently carried the entire Wang family of Beihai on his shoulders. In the past 2 years, except for the extremely tough declaration of war on the stage of Formidable Person, Wang Xingxiao had never made any radical remarks to the outside world. Under Wang Xingxiao's command, the various forces inside Beihai had a sense of propriety. They were tough when they needed to be tough and they gave in when they needed to give in. The Wang family of Beihai had indeed lost a lot of things in the past 2 years, but what everyone saw was that Wang Xingxiao had kept more things. In this state, Wang Xingxiao could easily remind people of the young Wang Tianzong. He was calm, steady, low-key, and silent. He looked at the whole world, but he never paid too much attention to any of his opponents or friends. He focused all his attention on the things that were worthy of his attention. He would not be angry when he was surpassed, nor would he be depressed when he was hit. He was like a high-strength spring. No matter how much pressure he was under, as long as there was a chance, he would immediately bounce back to his original shape, or even bounce higher and further. Li Tianlan looked at Wang Xingxiao silently. Wang Xingxiao's smile was weak and faint. He was not high-spirited or arrogant, but at this moment, he stood in front of Li Tianlan with indescribable confidence. The sword energy coat danced on him. The majestic sword energy flew and whistled, and the sharpness all over the sky was hidden. Wang Xingxiao stood motionless in the air, but there was an extremely condensed power slightly fluctuating with his breathing. The current you is a little interesting, Li Tianlan said calmly. He had officially entered the Invincible Realm. In other words, Li Tianlan didn't know whether he had entered the Invincible Realm, but there was no doubt that he had successfully broken through to a new level. The combat capability of the Invincible Realm had entered a new level. If it was not the Invincible Realm, what was it? There was a flash of confusion in Li Tianlan's eyes, and then he shook his head. After the breakthrough, he became extremely sensitive to all kinds of energy. The vague sword energy coat on Wang Xingxiao's body had a clear outline in his eyes. At a glance, he could roughly understand what was going on with Wang Xingxiao's state. Such a Wang Xingxiao, he was very difficult and tricky to deal with. Li Tianlan was almost sure that if he hadn't successfully broken through, he wouldn't have been a match for Wang Xingxiao. Wang Xingxiao's realm remained the same, but he had a magic weapon in his hand. The so-called magic weapon was Wang Tianzong's sword intent and sword energy, and it was the energy of Wuxia. This was the same reason that Li Tianlan could effortlessly sweep through the dark world when ruthless energy was abundant, or even more than that. If he hadn't successfully broken through, the current situation would have been a little embarrassing. Even now, Li Tianlan felt a little difficult to deal with. But, it was also very interesting. This is Tiannan, Li Tianlan said calmly. So? Wang Xingxiao raised his eyebrows slightly. Do you want to get out of here, or do you want me to ask you to get out? Li Tianlan asked. Wang Xingxiao was stunned and then he laughed. Obviously, he didn't expect Li Tianlan to say that. His smile was full of surprise. This is not your character. Li Tianlan might not be very familiar with Wang Xingxiao. But as a pursuer, it was impossible for Wang Xingxiao not to study Li Tianlan. What was Li Tianlan's character? It was the simplest. He came to Emperor Dong's palace from Beihai and even made a move, breaking into his bedroom. He wanted to rob Ruthless, and Wuyo even pierced his heart. Under normal circumstances, Li Tianlan would never let it go like this. But now it sounded like, as long as he left Tianan, everything would be fine. Are you in a bad state now? You need to adjust, or? Wang Xingxiao said thoughtfully, speculating the reason for Li Tianlan's concession. In his view, this was Li Tianlan's concession. I need to think. Li Tianlan frowned. You're not leaving? From Beihai to Tianan, Wang Xingxiao sighed softly. I really came from afar. I came for Xinyuan Feng. You know very well. Before the final battle broke out, you knew very well that this is the key to Beihai's future foothold. Li Tianlan didn't wait for him to finish. He simply nodded and said slowly, if you don't leave. He raised his palm hesitantly again, but his voice was extremely firm. Then don't leave. Boom. The world suddenly shook. Colorful sword light burst out of Li Tianlan's palm in an instant. The messy light flew around, and Li Tianlan's figure appeared directly in front of Wang Xingxiao. He punched. Li Tianlan's figure became completely blurred. After the breakthrough, his speed became faster. As he moved, Li Tianlan's body completely pulled out dozens of residual shadows. A large number of residual shadows had not disappeared, and the sound of countless punches and kicks had suddenly sounded. In the next second, the colorful sword light, which broke out first but arrived a step later than Li Tianlan, completely drowned the two figures in it. The sky above Emperor Dong's palace was full of colorful sword light. In the messy light and shadow, the two figures directly collided in the most direct way. Two different kinds of sword energy madly entangled and fought, and the incomparably loud dragon roar echoed in the sky. In an instant, one of the figures directly turned into fragments all over the sky. A large number of fragments turned into streams of light. The streams of light turned into Wang Xingxiao one after another. The sword energy kept fluctuating, and the moment countless Wang Xingxiao appeared, they merged into one again. A crisp and cold sword chime abruptly rang out between heaven and earth. High in the sky, Li Tianlan's eyes slightly narrowed. A snow-white stream of light had appeared in Wang Xingxiao's hand. The light was extremely heavy but so flexible. Firmament. This was the giant sword that Wang Xingxiao had been using since he was a child. The giant sword, which was almost taller than Wang Xingxiao, was directly pulled out of the sword energy coat. The moment the light shone, the sword with absolute explosive power had directly crossed the space and reached in front of Li Tianlan. Wang Dao sword. The sword edge kept trembling, destroying everything and moving forward. This was a kind of truly invincible momentum. Unparalleled in the world, crushing everything. The extremely condensed sword energy and energy vibrated wildly. Wang Xingxiao's figure was no longer blurred. The sword energy coat covering his body was exposed in front of everyone, and his clothes were completely flying. Wang Xingxiao's eyes were cold, and his aura was rising almost endlessly and crazily. Sword energy, sword intent, sword momentum, everything reached the peak in an instant. Outbreak. It was the most thorough and continuous outbreak without any reservation. The sword light went completely out of control. Heaven and earth kept shattering in the sword light. They turned into giant swords that covered the sky one after another. There was no order. Countless phantoms of giant swords appeared in front of Li Tianlan in an instant, as if they were crazy. Wang Dao's sword was completely formed. Without any hesitation, Wang Xingxiao, who continued to break out, suddenly raised the sword. The sword momentum changed. Overbearing sword. Fierce, crazy, unreasonable and murderous intense sword into the sky. The monstrous sword light swept everything, and countless sword lights turned into Wang Xingxiao one after another. Every Wang Xingxiao appeared next to the giant sword phantoms of Wang Dao sword. Attack, attack, attack. Without any pause, countless Wang Xingxiao and countless giant swords attacked Li Tianlan at the same time. He did not retreat. Li Tianlan's body stiffened for a moment. The rainbow-colored sword light quickly retracted. The next second, everyone heard a sharp sound that seemed to tear the world apart. Li Tianlan seemed to have turned into an extremely pure sword light in an instant. All the way forward, penetrating everything. The colorful sword light streaked across the sky with a long streamline. It shattered, and disappeared. Wherever the sword light passed, the giant sword phantoms and Wang Xingxiao were torn into extremely messy sword energy at the same time. Li Tianlan, who had turned into a sword light, kept accelerating, getting faster and faster. A large number of giant swords disappeared almost at the same time. The sword light moved forward. It kept moving forward. It was tough, resolute, decisive and ruthless. The shining sword light almost broke the attack of Wang Dao's sword and overbearing sword in an instant and appeared in front of Wang Xingxiao. Wang Xingxiao did not retreat either. The huge sword edge in the sky vibrated, and his figure instantly became illusory. The sword energy coat, which had become completely obvious, completely wrapped his body again. Wang Xingxiao held the hilt with both hands. In the blink of an eye, he also turned into a sword light. Rush forward. No compromise, no retreat. Indomitable forward, the extreme outbreak. The surging sword light and energy burned almost endlessly, rushing to the colorful light in the sky. Heavenly Sword. Chapter 1053. The two beams of sword light approached each other with the same determination and strength. Heaven and earth had become completely chaotic at this moment. Colorful and dazzling, Li Tianlan, who had turned into a sword, moved from top to bottom. Everywhere he passed, the sky and the earth were filled with all kinds of light. It was incomparably bright and incomparably fierce. Every color and every ray of light was a different sword energy, majestic and chaotic, but perfectly integrated together. Countless sword intents turned into the purest sword light. This was no longer the 24 moves of sword. At this moment, this light was the purest swordsmanship. The colorful light kept refracting. Wang Xingxiao, however, rushed up from below. Blurred. Everything was blurred. It was a blurry and chaotic state. It was neither resplendent nor gorgeous. It was like a transparent flame that burned everything in its surroundings. His body rushed up. With his original combat power as the center, everything completely evaporated in the blurred light and shadow. The blurred sword light, which seemed to be able to burn everything, continued to accelerate and burst out. The air, space, and even the colorful sword light in all directions were all burned into nothingness. The surging colorful light spread again and completely covered all the buildings in Emperor Dong's palace. The moment the sword energy covered Emperor Dong's palace, the two beams of light, one above and one below, collided with each other in an extremely fierce manner. It was not the loud sound of gold and iron colliding. The moment the sword light collided, there was a dull sound like a fist hitting a fist. Breaking, boiling, chaotic and erupting. The incomparably sharp colorful sword light directly tore the transparent flame that seemed to be able to burn everything at the moment of contact. The flame-like sword light shot out in all directions in an extremely messy manner. The sword energy went completely wild with unimaginable destructive power. In the incomparably bright and shining light, Li Tianlan's palms suddenly turned over. The invisible shock wave of their collision shattered the space and swept toward all the buildings and people in Emperor Dong's palace. The next second, the colorful light that covered the entire Emperor Dong's palace suddenly lit up. Few people could notice this momentary change. But the few thunder-shocking realm experts in Emperor Dong's palace were keenly aware of all this. In the crowd, the military counselor's pupils suddenly contracted for a moment. The seemingly endless colorful sword light covered the entire Emperor Dong's palace, including everyone, every tree, every blade of grass, and every drop of water. It was soft, tough, and peaceful. The transparent sword light that was torn apart by Li Tianlan flew wildly. For ordinary people, the aftermath was absolutely destructive. The impact of the collision between the two spread everywhere. The messy transparent sword light and the shock wave swept through the entire Emperor Dong's palace in an instant, including everyone in the Emperor Dong's palace. The shining colorful sword light fluctuated slightly, and a large number of colorful ripples suddenly appeared in the air. However, nothing in the entire Emperor Dong's palace was damaged or changed by the shock wave. This was definitely not something that sword chi could do. Sword chi and sword intent that focused on attacking could indeed play a protective role at times, but it could not be so perfect. As Li Tianlan turned his hand, the colorful sword light that covered the entire Emperor Dong's palace suddenly became a domain. And it was an incomparably perfect and pure domain. Everyone was a little confused, including Li Tianlan himself. Li Tianlan didn't know why it was like this. He just felt that he could do it, but he didn't know why. In the crowd, only Xinyuan Wushang and Xing Tian watched all this silently and didn't speak. They didn't recognize the so-called four realms of martial arts in Miracle City at all. The chi-controlling, ice-condensing, fire-flaming, thunder-shocking realm sounded like it, but in fact it was specious. As for the invincible realm, it was even more ridiculous. The division between sword chi and domain was completely correct, but also completely wrong. Different ways of thinking would touch different truths, and all cognition would inevitably be limited. Domain, sword chi, everything was actually the most basic thing, energy. Pure energy. Different changes of energy would have different manifestations such as sword qi and domain. But in essence it was the same. It was energy. The so-called martial arts and even higher levels, different paths, all had a more accurate adjective. Xinyuan Wuxiang knew that Li Tianlan would be confused, but he didn't dare to say and couldn't say the words that could only be perceived by Li Tianlan himself. Authority. Xinyuan Wuxiang watched quietly. The completely transparent but burning sword light was broken into countless pieces, flying messily over Emperor Dong's palace. The dense sword light turned into a domain in the blink of an eye. Li Tianlan paused for a moment. Without hesitation. In the twinkling of an eye, the completely messy transparent sword light suddenly changed. The deceiving Taoist sword. Wang Xingxiao's figure was completely invisible. The entire space of Emperor Dong's palace seemed to be completely burning, blurring. The messy flying transparent sword qi and the burning space had completely merged into one, and it was difficult to distinguish them from each other. Wang Xingxiao completely completed the most perfect concealment while retreating. The sword light surged violently. The burning space was also surging. Heaven and earth seemed to be moving but also seemed to be completely different. Li Tianlan, who was surrounded by the colorful sword light, suddenly tightened his body. The sword light was like a tide, spreading in an instant, mighty and mighty. In an instant, the completely violent but illusory transparent sword light rushed toward Li Tianlan from all kinds of weird and tricky angles. Front and back, left and right, up and down. Endless attacks came from every unimaginable angle. It was hard to predict and impossible to guard against. The essence of Beihai's swordsmanship was indeed an outbreak. The swordsmanship of Beihai emphasized momentum, but it didn't mean that their swordsmanship didn't have corresponding changes and dexterity. As a superfamily that had represented the pinnacle of swordsmanship in the dark world for hundreds of years, Beihai's swordsmanship itself was flawless. The deceitful Taoist sword sounded like only one move, but it was the pinnacle of the swordsmanship skills of the Wang family of Beihai. It was unpredictable and peerlessly bizarre, like a violent storm that was impossible to guard against. The sword light surged and vibrated. The colorful sword light held up for a moment with Li Tianlan as the center and turned into a colorful halo. The halo was completely torn apart by the transparent sword energy in an instant. The absolutely abundant energy tore apart Li Tianlan's sword energy defense, and countless attacks fell on Xinyuan Feng's black windbreaker in an instant. Aggressive and oppressive, Wang Xingxiao, who had enough strength to support him, seemed to be a completely different person. He was strong, determined, and decisive. His every move and every sword strike carried a touch of madness that was no less than Li Tianlan's. The indistinct sword light instantly brought about an incomparably violent storm. The transparent sword light kept flying and shuttling around the whole Emperor Dong's palace, with distinct layers and more tricky angles of attack. The sword energy cut through the windbreaker, hair and face. Li Tianlan's face was directly cut by the sword energy, leaving a shocking wound. Blood flowed out. The wound healed instantly. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly, and the colorful sword light around him suddenly turned. The colorful light that covered the whole Emperor Dong's palace instantly shrank toward Li Tianlan. The light swept everything, and all the transparent sword light shuttling from all directions was swept and pressed toward Li Tianlan in an instant. The sword light completely turned into a domain. The domain that contained all the transparent sword light shrank completely, and the whole battlefield was shrunk in an instant. Wang Xingxiao might not be a threat, but his current situation was a little tricky. His sword energy and Wang Tianzong's were of the same origin, which was the result of being influenced since childhood. During the half a year on the stage of Formidable Person, Wang Xingxiao would be completely baptized by Wang Tianzong's sword energy every night. Now Wang Xingxiao's sword intent and Wang Tianzong's sword energy were almost completely compatible, and worryless energy was the strongest catalyst and fusing agent. It merged with Wang Tianzong's sword energy and became a coat that covered Wang Xingxiao. In this state, fighting with Wang Xingxiao was equivalent to fighting with Wang Tianzong directly. After all, as the energy core, Worryless could completely bear the sword energy of the Chosen One. It was even more suitable as a pure energy body than Xinyuan Feng. The sword energy of the father and son was infinitely compatible, but after all, it was not completely compatible. Even so, Wang Xingxiao's real combat capability at this time had reached the real peak, and he was only half a step away from Wang Tianzong in the period of Mormons. Before Wang Xingxiao's sword energy and worryless energy were used up, he was almost equal to the sword emperor of Zhongzhou state before the final breakthrough after fighting with tribulation. This state was undoubtedly stronger than Li Tianlan's state before the breakthrough. Li Tianlan had just broken through and needed to familiarize himself with it, while Wang Xingxiao could continue to make his sword intent and Wang Tianzong's sword energy more compatible. What did this mean? It meant that as long as worryless energy was not used up, it could always replenish Wang Tianzong's sword energy. Then when Wang Xingxiao's sword intent and Wang Tianzong's sword energy were completely compatible, Wang Xingxiao could fully exert Wang Tianzong's peak strength when he was in Mormons. In other words, this was the true strength of a supreme heavens chosen. Wang Xingxiao's path was completely clear from today on. He only needed to make his sword intent fit Wang Tianzong. There was no bottleneck and the road in front of him could directly reach that supreme level. Li Tianlan's sword intent had been perfect, and there was no bottleneck. As long as he had time he could also reach the supreme level. What both sides needed was time. Who would be faster? This step meant too many things. It was not only the advance and retreat between Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai, but also the life and death between Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai. Even Li Tianlan himself did not expect that an opponent he had left far behind would force him to the point where he could only race against time overnight. This was the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai, but it was also because of Wang Xingxiao's personal talent and efforts. This step between the two was extremely important. But it was not important. Realizing this, Li Tianlan was more determined. Wang Xingxiao might not have wanted to kill him at first. Because of the delicate relationship between Emperor Dong's palace and the Wang family of Beihai. But this so-called delicate relationship, no matter who took that step first, would be completely broken. In this case, what was the point of maintaining it now? Wang Xingxiao might have concerns. But Li Tianlan, who had broken through to the invincible realm and really stood on the threshold of the Chosen One, had no concerns. Kill? Such a Wang Xingxiao, such a deceitful Taoist sword, if it were in the past, it would be difficult for him to deal with. But the moment the sword energy turned into the domain, everything became clear. Li Tianlan's eyes suddenly became sharp, and the colorful light gathering toward him from all directions became brighter and brighter. The domain kept shrinking and the battlefield between the two shrank rapidly. Countless transparent sword chi were particularly bright in the domain that was completely covered by the colorful light, and a large number of sword lights were being forced to gather. 1, 2, 3, countless sword lights gathered together in the domain that was constantly shrinking. Sword of Emperor path. There was no thinking or hesitation at all. The moment when all the sword lights were about to gather, the sword momentum of the deceitful Taoist sword instantly changed. Wang Xingxiao's figure reappeared, and the huge sword edge of firmament had already pierced Li Tianlan's chest. It was really unimaginably determined and strong. Wang Xingxiao's sword intent had been changing, smart, determined, decisive, and confident. He had always followed Li Tianlan's fighting rhythm and never fell behind. Sword of Emperor path. Sovereign descent. Li Tianlan had also studied this. One sword. Among the 6 paths of reincarnation of the Wang family of Beihai, this was the simplest sword. It was also the sword that looked the most similar to Sword of Emperor path, but it was different. It could even be said that they were completely different. Sword of Emperor path emphasized momentum, but Sword of Emperor path sought simplicity. The simplest straight stab, the strongest explosion, the shortest distance, and the fastest speed. The simplest ones were often the ones that had been tempered thousands of times. The huge sword edge of firmament flashed with cold light. The sword and the figure instantly became extremely clear, simple, and ordinary. The sword edge went straight. Every time this seemingly simple sword trembled, it carried with it an extremely heavy sharpness and killing intent. This sword couldn't be avoided. Even Li Tianlan couldn't avoid it. The sword edge tore the air, crossed the distance, and the moment the heavy sword tip was fixed on the black windbreaker, Li Tianlan stretched out his hands. He put his hands together and the sword light shone. A strong and violent force burst out from Li Tianlan's hands. There was a sudden wild sound between heaven and earth. Blood gushed from Li Tianlan's hands, and the huge and heavy sword edge of firmament suddenly broke into 2 pieces. The moment the blood beads and the sword edge shone in the air, Wang Xingxiao let go of the sword hilt, put his fingers together like a sword, and pointed directly at Li Tianlan. The distance between the two narrowed in an instant. Wang Xingxiao had been attacking. He not only kept up with Li Tianlan's rhythm, but also tried to suppress Li Tianlan's rhythm. Li Tianlan had never experienced such a feeling in his life, except in the practice with Li Honghe. Wang Xingxiao's fingers even became completely transparent at this moment. The mighty sword energy gathered at his fingertips, with extreme power and speed. His sword intent was of the same origin as Wang Tianzong's. At this time, the sword energy on him was supreme. Worryless energy was extremely abundant. Even in terms of his own physique, Wang Xingxiao also had the innate wind and thunder veins. Wang Xingxiao had never been bad. Even though Li Tianlan had risen so fast, Wang Xingxiao, who had always kept a low profile, had always been regarded as one of the top experts of the younger generation. Now, with the appearance of the sword energy coat, all his shortcomings seemed to be completely made up. His own physique, his own vision, his own fighting art, everything seemed to be completely perfect. There was no firmament in his hands, but at this time, this sword was the closest to perfection. The holy sword. Calm, majestic, deep, and lofty. The sword energy and sword intent merged, the sword intent merged with the sword light merged with the energy, and the energy merged with the sword energy. In an instant, Wang Xingxiao's whole body became a sharp light that seemed to be able to split the world. The distance between the two was too close. The moment the sharp light rose, the irresistible sword intent of the holy sword appeared directly in front of Li Tianlan. At such a close distance, Li Tianlan punched Wang Xingxiao's arm hard without hesitation. Their arms collided fiercely, and the sword energy soared into the sky. The second before the holy sword was about to explode, Wang Xingxiao, who had his fingers together like a sword, suddenly loosened his palm. His palm slightly deviated under Li Tianlan's fist, but in an instant he stretched forward and suddenly grabbed Li Tianlan's clothes. Li Tianlan's clothes? What were Li Tianlan's clothes now? It was ruthless. It was Xin Yuan Feng, who had just absorbed a small part of worryless energy but had not recovered yet. Wang Xingxiao had never forgotten his purpose. Li Tianlan was very strong, completely stronger than he had expected. In Wang Xingxiao's estimation, Li Tianlan's combat capability should be weaker than it was now. He came to Tiannan to take Xin Yuan Feng because he had speculated that Li Tianlan was very likely to be seriously injured, but he had also been prepared for Li Tianlan not to be injured. He thought that his current strength should be stronger than Li Tianlan's. But when he saw Li Tianlan, he knew that it was not the case at all. Not to mention anything else, Wang Xingxiao could not figure out Li Tianlan's second heart. He had thought that his strength was already stronger than Li Tianlan's. As long as worryless merged with ruthless, he would not have to worry about Emperor Dong's palace in the future. Even if Wang Tianzong could not recover in the next few years, with the combination of worryless and ruthless, the Wang family of Beihai would have the peak combat capability. Or if Wang Tianzong's injury recovered, or if his sword intent and his father's sword energy were perfectly integrated, then there was no need to be afraid of Li Tianlan. He felt that he was stronger than Li Tianlan, and the speed of merging sword energy should be faster. It would not be too late to deal with Emperor Dong's palace then. But now, Li Tianlan, he seemed to have broken through? The two seemed to have stood at the same starting point and looked at the same end. Li Tianlan had the intention to kill Wang Xingxiao. When Wang Xingxiao realized this, how could he not have the intention to kill Li Tianlan? But no matter what, his main target was still Wu Qing. If he could get ruthless today, the battle with Li Tianlan might not have to happen today. He suddenly grabbed Li Tianlan's collar with his outstretched hand. The moment the mighty sword energy suddenly broke out, Wang Xingxiao suddenly raised his head. In his sight, he saw Li Tianlan's extremely calm and indifferent face. Calm, resolute, and calm. He did not retreat, give way, dodge, or avoid. Li Tianlan raised his palm. A strong uneasiness instantly enveloped Wang Xingxiao. There was no hesitation, no time to think. He suddenly loosened his grip on Xin Yuan Feng's collar. The incomparably majestic sword light suddenly broke out in his hand, burning everything. Wang Xingxiao's whole body seemed to be completely burning at this moment. 6 Paths of Reincarnation Sword. Chapter 1054. There was no transition. The stalemate in everyone's eyes seemed to be completely broken in the blink of an eye. Sword light filled the sky above Emperor Dong's palace. The moment Li Tianlan and Wang Xingxiao got closer, Wang Xingxiao loosened his grip on Xin Yuan Feng's collar. With unprecedented determination and madness, Wang Xingxiao completely burst out all his sword energy and energy. It was a kind of determination to die if he couldn't win. Staking everything on one throw was the most extreme madness. He was risking his life. It didn't matter whether the situation had reached this point or not. What mattered was that Wang Xingxiao didn't retreat at all. Burning. Breaking out. Without hesitation. Sort of 6 paths of reincarnation. The most powerful unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai, the peak of martial arts of the Wang family of Beihai, the intertwining sword intent suddenly burst out in Wang Xingxiao's hands. Light and shadow intertwined. A deafening buzz suddenly rang out in the chaotic and blurry world. The empty air, the messy light, the violent airflow, and everything in the world seemed to have sharp edges at this moment. They were sharp, radiating in all directions, yet surging with unparalleled power. Wang Xingxiao's body didn't change, but the moment the endless sword energy burned around him, his figure seemed to expand endlessly, occupying the whole Emperor Dong's palace and the whole world. In a trance, Wang Xingxiao's open palm instantly closed. Forward punch. The distance between him and Li Tianlan was too close. The distance between their palms was even closer. Just a few centimeters away, the fist with all the sword energy and energy burst smashed over, and the space between them suddenly broke. Wang Xingxiao's fist hit Li Tianlan's palm hard. The sword energy roared. Sword of 6 Paths of Reincarnation was the combination of the 6 moves of the Wang family of Beihai. The abundant sword energy and energy supported Wang Xingxiao's physical strength and will, and the sword energy kept blooming. The unparalleled sword of King Path. The extremely complicated and simple sword of Emperor Path. The indomitable sword of Dominating Way. The extremely weird sword of Mysterious Way. The irresistible sword of Heavenly Path. The majestic and peaceful sword of Holy Path. The sword energy rotated and grew endlessly. The buzzing sound of the sword energy between heaven and earth had instantly turned into an ear-piercing howl. The two figures, entangled in sword chi, collided wildly and rose rapidly into the sky. The sword chi became more and more violent. All the sword light left the ground of Emperor Dong's palace at the same time and bloomed in the air. 7 colored sword lights filled the sky. The sky was constantly being devoured by the burning sword chi. Chaos, whistling, and collision. The sky was filled with dazzling brilliance that shot through the air without restraint. Who will win? On the ground, 2 voices rang out almost at the same time. One was gentle while the other was heavy. Military advisor. Xing Tian. As soon as the words left their mouths, they were stunned at the same time and subconsciously looked at each other. Isn't that obvious? The same 2 voices gave the same answer at the same time. All of them sounded extremely confident. Qin Weibai and Shenyuan Wushang froze at the same time and looked at each other. Military counselor stood beside Qin Weibai. Xing Tian stood beside Shenyuan Wushang. However, the distance between them was not far, so the 4 of them looked like they were standing together. The exact same question, the exact same answer. Qin Weibai might have been blindly confident, but Shenyuan Wushang was reasonable. Xing Tian hesitated and wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. He couldn't say that he had completely seen through Li Tianlan's breakthrough, but at least he had some understanding. Strictly speaking, Li Tianlan's breakthrough could not be regarded as a breakthrough in martial arts, but it could not be said that it was not. To be precise, Li Tianlan's breakthrough was from the power level of Miracle City to another angle, an angle of the power level of Spacetime Corridor. This was undoubtedly a very obvious and absolutely strong transformation. However, because of the lack of a lot of information, Li Tianlan was now in a state of uncertainty. This state greatly limited Li Tianlan's performance. Obviously, he was not in his peak state. In this case, Li Tianlan's strength had naturally improved compared to before the breakthrough, but there were too many things that he needed to explore and was not clear about. So for now, this kind of combat strength improvement was actually relatively limited. This was the problem of upper and lower limits. If the upper limit of Li Tianlan after the breakthrough was 10, then in this state, Li Tianlan was probably standing at the end of the lower limit. It might be 3, 2, or even 1. The key to this reason was the lack of information. Wang Xingxiao, on the other hand, was completely different. He also had a lack of information, but he didn't know about it at all, so he didn't have any doubts in his heart. Whether Wang Tianzong's path was correct or not, at least he had reached a certain limit and end. The sword chi controlled worryless energy and Wang Xingxiao controlled the sword chi. Wang Xingxiao might not have broken through, but in this complete state, his realm was equivalent to infinitely close to that supreme realm. In this respect, his realm was higher than Li Tianlan, who had just entered the invincible realm. You think so? You're exaggerating. As if knowing what Xing Tian was thinking, Shenyuan Wushang said calmly, Wang Xingxiao's realm is very high, but how high can it be? He has his own foundation. It's not so much that his realm is high, but that the sword chi and Wuyo's realm are high. Now he looks perfect, but there are gaps in the combination and utilization of each other. So strictly speaking, even if Wang Xingxiao's current realm is higher than his brother's, it's not much higher. No matter when has my brother ever lost a battle with someone at the same level or slightly higher than him? The so-called stalemate right now is all fake. Fake. Qin Weibai looked at Shenyuan Wushang and asked. My brother didn't do his best. Shenyuan Wushang laughed. Tianlan is not a person who will hide his strength. Qin Weibai shook her head. Look around. Xinyuan Wushang said. They looked around at the same time. They were surrounded by the grass and trees of Emperor Dong's palace. In the extremely fierce and even destructive battle, Emperor Dong's palace was still intact. Although it could not be said to be unscathed, the damage was almost negligible. In their line of sight, wisps of colorful sword light were shining from everywhere. As Li Tianlan and Wang Xingxiao rose into the air, they rushed into the sky at the same time. Not doing his best was not hiding his strength. It was because Li Tianlan had put some of his attention elsewhere during the battle. After the battlefield left Emperor Dong's palace, Li Tianlan was really unscrupulous. Qin Weibai looked up at the sky. Everyone looked up at the sky at the same time. Xinyuan Wushang watched quietly and suddenly said, "It's very interesting," he said softly. "What?" Xing Tian and military counselor asked at the same time. "In the sky," Xinyuan Wushang said. Qin Weibai's brows furrowed slightly. The sun hung high in the sky above them. The sunlight covering the earth looked extremely blurry in the spreading sword light. The transparent burning sword energy was getting more and more violent. Wang Xingxiao continued to break out. His aura kept rising and he became crazier and more terrifying. The extremely dazzling seven-colored sword light was still shining. It was colorful. The battle might be extremely fierce. But the scene looked extremely beautiful and dreamy. Qin Weibai watched quietly. At this moment she didn't know if it was an illusion, but she seemed to feel that all the light in the colorful sky seemed to dim quietly for a moment. Chapter 1055. Almost no one noticed the abnormality in the sky. Or it could be said that the abnormality was too weak. Emperor Dong's palace was full of colorful lights, protecting all the domains. Countless domains, big and small, began to change the moment Li Tianlan and Wang Xingxiao rushed into the sky. The light turned into pure energy, and the energy turned into sword energy in the shortest time. The sword energy rose into the sky, quietly, faster and faster. The sky was full of dazzling brilliance. The sky was full of bright colors. However, this incomparably resplendent color was gradually becoming more intense. It was a very subtle change, but it was the simplest truth. The darker the sky was, the brighter the light was. What did this mean? Qin Weibai was a little confused. She subconsciously glanced at Xinyuan Wushang. Xinyuan Wushang kept his head up. Among all the people, perhaps except Li Tianlan, only Xinyuan Wushang and Qin Weibai noticed the change in the sky. Even Wang Xingxiao didn't notice it. All he noticed was that Li Tianlan's sword energy was getting stronger. After leaving the range of Emperor Dong's palace, Li Tianlan's combat capability almost improved a lot when he was in the air where he couldn't destroy the palace. The situation that seemed to be evenly matched gradually tilted towards one side. The transparent sword light was burning with colorful energy, and the colorful energy turned into sword light to extinguish the flame with a wave of Li Tianlan's hand. Li Tianlan became more and more determined. He let go of his scruples and kept increasing his strength. Sword energy, strength, speed, willpower, everything began to be absolutely concentrated. Wang Xingxiao clearly felt the suppression. This feeling of suppression gradually became more and more obvious, as if it was going to completely swallow him. Li Tianlan still had doubts deep in his eyes. But that confusion gradually began to disappear. In his eyes, Wang Xingxiao saw that he was thinking. It was very obvious. The sword energy roared and flew high in the sky. Wang Xingxiao's figure seemed to be getting bigger and bigger. 6 different kinds of sword energy constantly blended together. Their figures were getting higher and higher. The transparent sword light that burned everything was like a storm high in the sky, constantly expanding and completely enveloping the core of the battlefield. The storm began to shrink. A large piece of colorful sword light was torn apart. The outermost bright light collided with the edge of the storm and formed a stalemate. The center of the storm began to approach the two. Between heaven and earth, every space was filled with incredible sharpness. The scales that had already tipped over seemed to be pushed back bit by bit. This was the first time Wang Xingxiao had used the complete 6 paths of reincarnation sword. With his own realm, without the help of Wang Tianzong's sword energy, he couldn't even use the complete holy sword, let alone the 6 paths of reincarnation sword. 6 paths of reincarnation sword. He was very familiar but also very unfamiliar. Therefore there was still a gap in the most extreme eruption. However, with the improvement of his combat capability, even if there was a gap in his 6 paths of reincarnation sword, Li Tianlan could do nothing about it. However, Wang Xingxiao also knew this, so he didn't try to make up for the gap. Thus, the sword qi continued to circulate in the sky, and its power continued to increase, gradually approaching the peak of its power. If Wang Tianzong performed this move himself, there would be no process at all. At the moment when the two of them rushed to the sky, the 6 paths of reincarnation sword with the most extreme power would directly explode in the sky. But Wang Xingxiao needed time. This was a big difference, but it wasn't that big of a difference for the current battle. The 6 different sword lights became more condensed and sharp. Li Tianlan's suppression of Wang Xingxiao gradually disappeared. The storm raged high in the sky, and the whole sky seemed to become an extremely vague and transparent huge whirlpool at this moment. The edge of the whirlpool spread outward, but the core kept shrinking. The inner and outer layers. The whole whirlpool gradually formed a natural circle, and every arc of the whirlpool was extremely awe-inspiring. Suppression. At this moment, Wang Xingxiao even vaguely showed signs of suppressing Li Tianlan. More than 2 years. Even in the hundreds of years of the Dark World, if not counting the eternal sword above Mormons that ended Wang Tianzong's life, today's battle could almost be said to be the peak battle in the Dark World for hundreds of years. Wang Xingxiao's attack became more and more violent and domineering. The storm of sword energy whistled and rotated. His voice was calm and dignified. I can give you one last chance. Give me Shenyuan Feng and I can let you go today. Condescending. This posture was so dignified, but it was so natural. Li Tianlan, who had been thinking about something silently and dealing with Wang Xingxiao's attack, laughed when he heard this. Are you talking to me? Maybe you still don't understand your current situation. Wang Xingxiao's voice was flat and piercingly cold. Maybe you have a new breakthrough now, but you can't block this sword. I can give up the current sword energy and part of Wuyo's energy. But after this sword breaks out, I can only give up these at most, but I won't be hurt. The chance of you escaping unscathed is equal to 0. Do you still want to persist? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly and remained silent. The colorful light all over his body kept flying. Countless rays of light began to slow down and become sticky. The sky seemed to become darker. 6 paths of reincarnation is nothing more than this. Li Tianlan said blandly. Wang Xingxiao's eyes suddenly became sharp for a moment. In that case, go to hell. Crack! An extremely clear sound suddenly rang out in the sky. Sword of Wangdao, sword of deceit, sword of hegemony, sword of emperor path, sword of heavenly path, and sword of holy path. The 6 sword chis seemed to have completely merged together in the incomparably huge storm vortex. Wang Xingxiao suddenly straightened his body. The sword energy of the Chosen One burned wildly, and Wuyo's energy began to pour out without reservation. The huge vortex of sword energy seemed to be completely still at this moment. It was not static. The vortex was rotating so fast that it looked like it was motionless. Boom. The loud noise was earth-shattering. It exploded. The monstrous sword energy completely exploded at this moment. The indescribable sharpness swept across the air in an unstoppable manner. Space, airflow, sword light, and sharpness went forward. Everything was silently annihilated. The colorful sword light was swallowed and disintegrated at a speed visible to the naked eye. There was no room for resistance. The blazing sword light continued to expand, growing and multiplying endlessly, ceaselessly reincarnating without end. The burning sword light occupied the sky. The colorful light was getting less and less. 6 paths of reincarnation. This was the pinnacle of the Wang family of Beihai swordsmanship for hundreds of years. It was also the pinnacle of the Dark World swordsmanship for hundreds of years. In terms of swordsmanship, even the Li family's 24 moves of sword seemed to be a little less sharp than 6 paths of reincarnation. Today's Wang Xingxiao was infinitely close to perfection. This move of 6 paths of reincarnation was also infinitely close to perfection. The sword light was mighty above the sky. Wang Xingxiao, whose aura instantly became weak, watched the colorful sword light being swallowed by the burning sword energy and Li Tianlan being completely shrouded by the endless sword light. Do you regret it? He said in a hoarse voice. Shenyuan Feng is still mine. Li Tianlan raised his palm. The sword light seemed to be completely swallowing him in the next second. His voice resounded between heaven and earth. I still have one move. Are you afraid? What? Wang Xingxiao sneered. Li Tianlan's voice sounded with boundless coldness, calm and indifferent. Break of reincarnation. 24 moves of sword, break of reincarnation. The last move of 24 moves of sword was also an unfinished move. It was also the move that the war god used to restrain 6 paths of reincarnation. This move was not complete in the Li family. It was not complete in the Lin clan either. But this move was complete in the sky, very complete. Whoosh! An extremely sharp whistling sound suddenly rang out in the sky. All the colorful sword light did not disappear, nor was it swallowed. All the sword light completely changed the situation in an instant. The dazzling seven-colored light completely disappeared. All the sword light suddenly turned pure black. It was black, not dark. The pure and extreme black sword light suddenly burst out with Li Tianlan as the center. It was mighty like a black ocean. The surging black ocean completely broke the sword energy storm of 6 paths of reincarnation. Li Tianlan's figure turned into every drop of water in the black ocean. Every drop of water also turned into Li Tianlan. The ocean surged and destroyed everything. Li Tianlan's figure appeared directly beside Wang Xingxiao. His fingertips, which were condensed with thick black color, slowly touched Wang Xingxiao's sword energy coat. Boom! In the loud bang, the sword energy coat on Wang Xingxiao suddenly burst into pieces. Countless energy and sword energy became completely scattered. Chapter 1056. No words could describe Wang Xingxiao's feelings at this moment. Shock, astonishment, disbelief, despair, and a myriad of other emotions that even he couldn't describe. The dazzling seven-colored sword light that shone in the sky turned into the purest black in an instant. The darkness surged and spread out. At this moment, it was as if a black ocean had suddenly appeared in the sky. It was vast and mighty but extremely quiet. It was like eternal silence and coldness. This was the purest black. It rose and fell between heaven and earth, and even the shadows were completely contained in it. The sword energy was like the sea tearing the sky, the sword light, and the burning flame. Li Tianlan's figure was everywhere. He was infinitely close to Wang Xingxiao but infinitely far away. His whole person seemed to have completely become this black ocean, and he could appear in any corner at will. His fingertips touched Wang Xingxiao's sword energy coat. It was neither fast nor slow, but it was impossible to dodge. The sword energy that had completely turned black appeared in front of Wang Xingxiao, occupying his whole world. It was the ultimate shattering and destruction. Heaven and earth withered and everything turned into ashes. Nothing could continue to exist in this kind of sharpness. This sword seemed to be incomplete in Li Tianlan's hands, but it was already the most complete sword move. 24 moves of sword, break of reincarnation. Everything was forcibly suppressed. It was even completely crushed in an instant. The 6 paths of reincarnation sword, which Wang Xingxiao was not very familiar with, had countless flaws in this black ocean. The black ocean wrapped all the light and rushed forward. The 6 seemingly perfect and endless sword energy were suddenly completely torn into individuals. Li Tianlan's finger touched Wang Xingxiao's chest. Worryless energy and Wang Tianzong's sword energy were constantly turbulent, fragmented, and quickly separated. He lost. The ending was so clear. The sword energy coat clinging to his body was constantly broken. In the surging sword light, Li Tianlan's aura suddenly weakened, but Wang Xingxiao's aura almost fell to the bottom in an instant. The surging black ocean occupied the sky, blocking everyone's sight. The boundless black sword energy tore Wang Xingxiao's sword energy coat. Li Tianlan's eyes were firm and sharp. Broken reincarnation. This was not a sudden flash of inspiration that allowed him to complete this move of the absolute sword. Instead, it was a vague thought. It was not until he really converged all the light and the black sword chi was completely formed that he could be sure that the vague sword chi he felt in the sky above Mount Dibbing in North Sea was the break of reincarnation. He tried to imitate it, but it was completely beyond his abilities. Even though he had broken through again and obtained the second one, this heart was still unable to imitate even 1/10,000th of that sword's charm. However, in that instant of imitation he still managed to grasp some things in the end. These things became inspirations and ideas, constantly shining in his heart at the moment of his breakthrough. This time Li Tianlan stopped imitating. Under the circumstances where his abilities allowed it, he tried to use this sword. Compared with the sword in the sky, the power of this sword seemed to be countless times weaker, but it was just what Li Tianlan could bear. This sword directly tore apart the most imperfect part of Wang Xingxiao's 6 paths of reincarnation. The outcome had been decided. With victory and defeat there would be life and death. Li Tianlan did not hesitate. The overwhelming black sword chi shook with a loud bang. The sharp edge spread all over the sky and rushed to the sword chi coat on Wang Xingxiao. That was the armor of the combination of worryless energy and the chosen one's sword chi. Strictly speaking, as long as this coat was not completely destroyed, Wang Xingxiao, wrapped in it, would not be hurt no matter what he faced. For Li Tianlan, today Wang Xingxiao took a shortcut with the help of the foundation of North Sea, but he had become his biggest threat. If he let him go this time, Wang Xingxiao would be more difficult to deal with next time. So, kill. Go all out. The black sword light shook wildly, rolling up huge waves in the sea. The darkness continued to spread and absorb the sunlight. There was only the purest black and a faint light blue on the battlefield. Light blue? Li Tianlan was stunned. He suddenly felt that this scene was a little familiar. Wang Xingxiao was also stunned. Now he had no way to stop Li Tianlan's killing move. After all, he was a little too careless. If he hadn't consumed the sword qi in Kanglin, he might have had the power to fight against Li Tianlan now. But now, at least before returning to Mount Dibing to replenish his energy and sword qi, he had no way. Li Tianlan could not let him go. So the only thing Wang Xingxiao could do was to wait for death. When his coat was broken, the black sword light would completely crush him into powder. But that faint blue, Wang Xingxiao was sure that it was not his sword qi. He was also sure that it was not Li Tianlan's sword qi. The faint blue appeared so abruptly in the absolute darkness. It seemed to be harmless, but at this moment, both Wang Xingxiao and Li Tianlan felt extremely uncomfortable. Wang Xingxiao was panic-stricken, and Li Tianlan was disgusted. Without a sound, the faint blue color in the darkness suddenly extended and spread. The familiar feeling deepened in an instant. In Li Tianlan's sight, there was only a little blue light extending and becoming a virtual heartbeat. The line spread rapidly. The line spread rapidly. The black sword qi still existed. But at this moment, outside the sword qi, everything in the world seemed to become illusory. Outside the sword qi, the sunlight, the white clouds, the air, the wind, everything turned into a string of constantly flowing data. The world became virtual. All the distance disappeared completely. An incomparably blurry virtual figure was constantly outlined in the virtual world, becoming clearer and clearer, more and more real. He appeared in the black sword qi and appeared in front of Wang Xingxiao. What Li Tianlan saw was only the extremely deep and bright eyes in the other party's incomparably solemn eyes. All the virtual lines disappeared completely. The world was completely restored to reality. The figure of the man with double pupils was still a little vague and stood in front of Wang Xingxiao. The black ocean surged and drowned everything. The uninvited guest raised his palm without hesitation. Heaven and earth shook. The world instantly turned into night. The same black. The same sword qi. The moment the man with double pupils raised his hand, he used exactly the same unique skill as Li Tianlan. 24 moves of sword, break of reincarnation. The sword light kept blooming in his hand. At the same time, the man with double pupils pulled Wang Xingxiao. The world became virtual once again. Li Tianlan realized something in an instant. The moment the two black oceans collided, Li Tianlan, whose aura had gradually become weak, raised his palm again. The sword light swirled wildly between heaven and earth. The man with double pupils seemed to have expected it. His figure became more and more illusory without looking back. This is... Wang Xingxiao, who saw this scene clearly, suddenly narrowed his eyes for a moment. The sword light, which seemed to burn everything, burst with a loud bang with Li Tianlan as the center, touching Wang Xingxiao and the man with double pupils. 6 paths of reincarnation sword. Li Tianlan. 6 paths of reincarnation sword. The 6 paths of reincarnation sword that belonged to Li Tianlan. The sentence was so incongruous, but it was so true. Sword of king path, sword of deceitful path, sword of hegemony path, sword of emperor path, sword of heavenly path, and sword of holy path. The same 6 swords. Different from Wang Xingxiao. The 6 sword lights took shape in an instant, and then suddenly rose to the extreme in the next second. There was no brewing process. In an instant the extreme broke out. Boom. The incomparably wild sword light tore the black ocean of sword qi in an instant and swept over the figures of the man with double pupils and Wang Xingxiao. The figures of the two had become blurred. The sword light swept over and their bodies shook for a moment at the same time. The next second the virtual line spread quickly. The figures of the two suddenly disappeared. Chapter 1057. The virtual light blue lines were dotted with white dots. Everything was digitized the moment it was enveloped by the light. The faint light burst out from a point and spread in all directions. The light faded the white clouds and sunlight in the sky and outlined the shape of a door. 2 completely virtual figures fell out of the door and stumbled. One of them knelt on one knee, and the other almost fell to the ground. Cough, cough, cough. Blood kept flowing out of Wang Xingxiao's mouth along with coughing. The moment when the sword energy coat was constantly pulled and deformed and torn might have been very short, only less than 1/10 of a second, but the pervasive sword energy still left extremely serious injuries inside and outside his body. In addition, it was the first time he had experienced such an incredible virtual travel. The moment he returned to the real world, he was extremely embarrassed. Wang Xingxiao crushed a button on his body with trembling hands and swallowed the powder mixed with his blood. He put his hands on the ground and gasped for breath. Lin Shi, who was kneeling on one knee, also coughed up a cloud of blood, but his breath completely stabilized at once. The scorching sun shone unscrupulously in the endless grassland. He slowly straightened his body and sized up his surroundings. A bit further away, the apostle and saint were currently rushing over with quick steps. It's safe here. Lin Shi looked down at Wang Xingxiao and reached out to him. His Majesty won't chase us here. Wang Xingxiao hesitated for a moment. Although the other party had saved his life, Wang Xingxiao was very sure that he did not know the other party after careful observation. There was no such thing as unwarranted kindness in this world. Any seemingly unrequited kindness meant that he would have to pay a greater price to repay it in the future. He took a deep breath, held Lin Shi's hand and stood up. He was vigilant, but he did not show it on the surface. You saved me. Don't worry about it, Lin Shi said with a smile. Wang Xingxiao looked around and was in a trance. They seemed to be in the center of a grassland, but this grassland was a little too big. With Wang Xingxiao's eyesight, he could not see the end of the grassland. About 1,000 meters away, there was a blurry black and white color, and they were in groups. Zebras? Wang Xingxiao was a little stunned. It seemed to be a huge group of zebras. This was a safari park? Was there such a large-scale wildlife park in Tiannan? Not to mention the safari park, it was not easy to find such a large piece of flat grassland in Tiannan, which was mostly mountainous and not much developed. Wang Xingxiao was not sure about the details of Tiannan, but he was sure that there should be no wildlife parks around Shenyuan City. This plan could only be carried out after 3 years. So, Wang Xingxiao carefully recalled the magical shuttling just now. Lin Shi pulled him into a door and then opened another door. The whole process only took a few seconds. Had they left Li Tianlan's sword Qi in such a short time? Left Emperor Dong's palace? Left Shenyuan City? How was this possible? Wang Xingxiao thought silently, recalling where the nearest safari park was from Shenyuan City. He asked subconsciously, where is this? Africa. Lin Shi said softly, to be exact, it's West Africa. His voice was indifferent. Cough, 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 cough. Wang Xingxiao couldn't catch his breath and instantly coughed violently. Blood flowed out of his mouth again, which was shocking. But Wang Xingxiao didn't care about this at all. He raised his head and looked at Lin Shi, dumbfounded. In a hurry, the Mandarin in his mouth suddenly turned into the northeastern dialect of Beihai with a little foreign emphasis. What the hell are you talking about? We're in West Africa, so we're very safe here. His Majesty can't catch up with us here. Calm down, don't get excited. Lin Shi looked at Wang Xingxiao. The smile on his face disappeared, and his whole person became very calm. This extremely outstanding appearance of the 11th prince of the war god realm was really like his father. He was not very domineering but not as gentle as Jade. Most of the time he was calm and even had no characteristics, but it was impossible to ignore him. Africa. West Africa. Wang Xingxiao murmured to himself and shook his head hard. Apostle and Saint trotted over. Your Highness, how are you? Apostle looked solemn, but Saint was as if facing a formidable enemy. She even raised her palms subconsciously, and a thick white light flashed in her hand. Li Tianlan. They were still very unfamiliar with this identity and this name. The Li Tianlan they knew was completely different from the current Li Tianlan. No matter how short the fight between Lin Shi and him was, it was enough to make people's scalps tingle, and they didn't dare to be careless. Your Highness. Wang Xingxiao subconsciously caught this sensitive word, and his mind became more and more confused. I'm fine. Lin Shi shook his head and gestured to Wang Xingxiao. His injury is more serious. Saint raised her palm without any hesitation. An incomparably dazzling milky white beam of light suddenly burst out from her hand and enveloped Wang Xingxiao. A warm feeling instantly enveloped Wang Xingxiao's whole body. Then it was beyond him. It was a repair within the scope of common sense. The external wound healed quickly. The incomparably pure and soft energy went deep into his internal organs, healing all the injuries. The speed of blood flow in his body continued to accelerate, and his cells seemed to be rapidly proliferating, regaining their activity. In a flash, Wang Xingxiao's injury had completely recovered. Wang Xingxiao stood there quietly, feeling the changes in his body. All these changes should make him ecstatic. But a strong sense of uneasiness and chill kept rising from his bones. almost freezing his soul. He didn't know what it meant. Not knowing was what scared him the most. Who the hell are you? Wang Xingxiao looked at Wang Xingxiao and asked seriously. In just a few seconds, Lin Shi had traveled thousands of kilometers from Tianan to Africa. Regardless of whether it was true or not, it was impossible for the middle-aged woman beside Lin Shi to completely heal his injuries with a single move. In fact, it was beyond everyone's knowledge. My name is Lin Shi. Lin Shi introduced himself again. One of the branches of the Lin clan. We have lost contact with the headquarters of the Lin clan many years ago. Now, we are the most down-and-out branch of the Lin clan, right? The most down-and-out? Wang Xingxiao raised his eyebrows. Yes. Lin Shi nodded naturally. In our branch there are only 3 of us here now. Even the family headquarters has to be relocated. Isn't this down-and-out enough? I don't think so. Wang Xingxiao shook his head calmly. With your ability, no one will think that you are the most down-and-out branch of the Lin clan. It doesn't matter what others think. Lin Shi said blandly, as long as you don't think so, it means that we have the basis for cooperation. Cooperation? Wang Xingxiao was stunned. Of course it's cooperation. Lin Shi said slowly, otherwise why would I save you? Wang Xingxiao thought quickly in his mind and said cautiously, what kind of cooperation are you going to do? It's about dealing with His Majesty Li Tianlan. Lin Shi said seriously, but his words sounded extremely awkward to Wang Xingxiao. Deal with Li Tianlan? Then we are enemies? But what about the sincere respect and awe in your words? Deal with Emperor Dong's palace? Wang Xingxiao said to himself. No, it's against His Majesty Li Tianlan, and only against His Majesty Li Tianlan. Lin Shi said slowly, I will re-edit my identity. Now, I need a position that can stand opposite to His Majesty. Chapter 1058. Wang Xingxiao found it hard to understand the logic of Lin Shi's words for a moment. However, he could still understand the simplest and most obvious meaning. This seemingly inexplicable and mysterious guy, who was indeed very powerful, was going to stand on the opposite side of Li Tianlan. He needed such a position. This position might not be the basis for his cooperation with the Wang family of Beihai, but with this position and his strength, everything could be discussed. Wang Xingxiao pondered for a while. In today's battle with Li Tianlan, both sides had probably exposed the limits of their combat strength, which was equivalent to falling out with each other. When both sides were only one step away from that supreme realm, or even half a step away, was the tacit understanding between them that they had not made it clear but had decided to break the balance after the breakthrough to settle the score was still there. Wang Xingxiao was not sure. After all, he could not be completely sure of the current strength of Emperor Dong's palace and the specific development in the next few years. But in terms of the foundation of the Wang family of Beihai, if he and Wang Tianzong's sword energy completely matched and reached that supreme level, plus the foundation of Beihai overall, he no longer needed to help Emperor Dong's palace. Even now, if he had a chance to kill Li Tianlan, he would not hold back. What about Li Tianlan? Wang Xingxiao nodded and then shook his head. Anyway, now if someone wanted to stand with him to fight against Li Tianlan, he would welcome it. The premise was that the other party really stood on the same side as him. Do you have a grudge against Li Tianlan? Wang Xingxiao asked. No. Lin Shi shook his head slightly. In fact, although the current His Majesty is different from the His Majesty I know, in essence, he has always been one of the people I admire the most. He deserves everyone's respect. I mean everyone. Wang Xingxiao looked at Lin Shi strangely. He held back the words that were on the tip of his tongue, but he did not say them in the end. In fact, he really wanted to ask him, Little brother, did you recite the wrong lines? He swallowed the words, but he laughed sarcastically. In that case, why do you choose to stand on my side to fight against the person you admire the most? I'm just on my side. Lin Shi seriously confirmed his position and then continued, in order to continue to grow in a sense, you can think of it as challenging the strong for your own improvement. This statement wasn't completely accurate, but it was absolutely reasonable. Right now, Li Tianlan was not a strong man in his eyes. But if the environment was limited here, he was indeed no match for Li Tianlan. How to become Li Tianlan's opponent? This was what Lin Shi wanted to do this time, and it was also his way of growth. Wang Xingxiao looked at Lin Shi expressionlessly and did not speak for a long time. Time passed slowly in silence. After some time he suddenly asked, Is this really Africa? While Wang Xingxiao was silent, Lin Shi had been quietly looking at the endless grassland in the distance. When he heard Wang Xingxiao's words, he nodded. This place is less than 200 kilometers away from Lagos. If you want, I can take you there to verify it. The apostle at the side suddenly waved his hand. A metal ball about the size of a ping-pong ball suddenly appeared in his hand. The incomparably smooth metal ball shone with a soft luster under the sunlight, seemingly without the slightest gap. The apostle threw the metal ball in his hand into the air. The next second, an incomparably clear roar suddenly rang in Wang Xingxiao's ears. The metal ball kept vibrating in the air, replacing and reassembling itself. Its mass was increasing rapidly, and the ball kept expanding, getting bigger and bigger, becoming more and more irregular. Almost in the blink of an eye, the round ball's shape completely changed. It had 4 limbs, and the arc on the surface of the ball was completely flattened. It was as if there was a blade constantly sliding on the huge metal, and the disintegrated metal pieces became different shapes and rearranged themselves. Wang Shengxiao looked at this scene in a daze, unable to speak anymore. Right in front of him, the extremely small metal ball directly turned into a metal giant more than 10 meters tall. It was not an ordinary metal humanoid creation. The metal giant in front of him had sharp edges and clear body lines. It had intelligent facial features, and its body was also covered in metal armor. A large amount of liquid metal kept flowing on its body, adjusting every part of its body. When all the adjustments were completed, the huge metal giant closed its mouth and silently knelt in front of the apostle. Wang Xingxiao looked at the silent giant. He was once very familiar with this giant. He had seen this giant countless times in different situations. His mind seemed to have become incomparably chaotic at this moment. All types of worlds intertwined in his mind, becoming a mess. Permanently preserved on the bookshelf, recorded reading history. The apostle casually waved his hand. The body of the huge metal giant kneeling in front of him quickly changed. Its body gradually shrunk, but its structure became more and more compact, its entire body giving off an incomparably tough and fierce feeling. Wang Xingxiao watched as the metal giant, in just a few short seconds, turned into an extra-large 7-seater off-road vehicle. An enormous off-road vehicle of a model he had never seen before. That made sense. How could he have fucking seen this so-called model before? The atmosphere became completely silent. Lin Shi was silent for a while. He looked at the off-road vehicle, which was extremely unsightly in his eyes, and laughed self-mockingly. Look, the 3 of us look like 3 acrobats, don't we? The mockery and self-mockery in his smile were extremely obvious. However, Wang Xingxiao didn't think too much about it. He was also looking at the car in front of him. This car was very unfamiliar to him, but the image of the metal giant just now was extremely familiar to him. Taking a deep breath, he looked at the apostle and slowly asked, "Megatron?" The apostle was stunned. He quickly entered the Miracle Cities network based on Wang Xingxiao's 3 keywords, and then he laughed. If you like him, he can also become that, Optimus Prime? Alright, this is a joke. This is Sky Hunter's shadow, my first child. As for the Megatron you mentioned, it does look a bit like him. But this is just a coincidence. The apostle said as he reached out his hand. Get in the car. We can set off for Lagos now. Lagos? The capital of Nigeria, the largest economy on the continent. Wang Xingxiao silently walked into the car, his mind becoming more and more chaotic. A huge impact kept striking his mind, and for a moment he didn't even know what to say. Or rather, he wanted to say too many things, but he didn't know how to start. You have a lot of doubts. Lin Shi sat in the car, looked at Wang Xingxiao and said quietly, "Yes." Wang Xingxiao nodded, then shook his head. He took a deep breath, looked at Lin Shi and slowly said, "I think we should have a good talk." Chapter 1059. The mighty, overbearing and somewhat ostentatious huge off-road vehicle was driving on the vast grassland. The interior of the car was extremely spacious. It was even abnormally spacious beyond the surface area of the vehicle itself. The soft and delicate leather sofa was extremely comfortable. Wang Xingxiao and Lin Shi sat face to face. A little farther away, a light curtain full of the aura of the future was suspended in front of the apostle. A large number of pictures were rolling on the light curtain. The apostle looked at them with great interest as if he was understanding something. Saint, who was not outstanding in appearance but had an extremely quiet and gentle temperament, sat elegantly on the other side, looking down at a very thick book. The sunlight occasionally flowed on the branches and leaves. Wang Xingxiao occasionally glanced at it, only to find that it was full of symbols that he didn't recognize. The vehicle moved forward steadily. But there was no driver. Not to mention a driver, this vehicle didn't even have a cab. The entire interior space of the vehicle had been thoroughly transformed. Lin Shi sat on the sofa very relaxed. In front of him was a device similar to a laptop. At this time he collected the information one by one and placed them on the screen of the laptop. You can have a look at all of these. In the silence, Lin Shi suddenly spoke. He handed the laptop in his hand to Wang Xingxiao and said in a calm voice. Wang Xingxiao, who was silently thinking about something, was stunned and subconsciously took the laptop. The densely packed documents almost took up the entire screen. The screen was divided into 3 small screens. The title above the first small screen was Emperor Dong's Palace. The title above the second small screen was the Wang family of Beihai, and the title on the third screen was a question mark. Wang Xingxiao glanced at Lin Shi with some doubts. The current database of Emperor Dong's Palace has been protected by the quantum network. For some reason we can't crack it or invade it, but... No, wait a minute. Wang Xingxiao looked up at Lin Shi with a confused face. Quantum network? Lin Shi said yes. This answer was too brief and affirmative, which annoyed Wang Xingxiao. Where is the quantum network? Quantum network. Wang Xingxiao was no stranger to this term. Beihai's biological research level was at the top of the world, but its advantages in other aspects were not obvious. It could even be said that it was at a disadvantage in many fields. But even at a disadvantage, Beihai still did not give up on some high-end scientific fields. Quantum network was also a research topic in Beihai, and it was one of the most cutting-edge topics. How advanced was it? In Beihai this research project was only a small team. It was so cutting-edge that Beihai didn't even have the energy to invest in it. Therefore this was just a research project. There wasn't even a laboratory. During the decisive battle in the North Sea, Qin Fangqing immediately used his authority to block all the communication signals in the North Sea. As a result, the North Sea suffered great losses as soon as the battle began. At that time, the scientists in the North Sea had said what would happen if this so-called quantum network existed. But this is only if. It was the if of North Sea. It was also the world's if. At present, no country in the world had a real quantum network, and it was foreseeable that it would be impossible for a long time to come. The so-called quantum network was just a theory, and the research in this area had just begun. How could Emperor Dong's palace have the so-called quantum network? Wang Xingxiao felt like an idiot, but because of some doubts he had to ask, what is a quantum network? He felt that he and Lin Shi had a different understanding of certain terms. Maybe the quantum network that Lin Shi was talking about was the internet that everyone knew? This might sound nonsensical, but it was the most likely scenario. Lin Shi glanced at the apostle. The apostle, who was currently researching something in front of his own light screen, looked at Wang Xingxiao and laughed. I've investigated the progress of some large countries' research on quantum networks. From certain aspects they are correct. At the very least, the most basic theory is correct. The key to opening the quantum network is the phenomenon of quantum entanglement. When 2 microscopic particles are on opposite sides of the universe, no matter how far apart they are, as long as the 2 particles are quantum entangled, by changing the quantum state of one particle, the state of the other particle that is very far away can also be changed. The signal can transcend the barriers of space and time and directly reach the other particle. However, due to some special reasons, the understanding of some special things by the quantum scientists here has deviated, so it is very difficult for them to solve basic problems, such as the so-called uncertainty principle. As the apostle spoke, his smile became more and more obvious. The fragile nature of quantum particles makes it very difficult for them to solve the problem of information loss. The solution they have proposed and experimented with can't be said to be wrong, but it is very clumsy. It's like they can reach out and get something, but there is a wall in front of them that they can't break at all. The thing is right there, but if they want to get it, they have to take a detour, and they have to walk around the Earth to get to the other end. Judging from their current progress, they can only achieve short-distance information transmission with a single node at most. Strictly speaking, that can't even be regarded as a real quantum network. Wang Xingxiao looked at the apostle silently and then at Lin Shi. So, there is no real quantum network on Earth, so where does the quantum network come from in Emperor Dong's palace? Let me correct you. The apostle looked at Lin Shi, who had been silent, and continued, I'm not telling you that there is no quantum network here. I'm just saying that your quantum science has just started, and quantum scientists haven't developed a quantum network, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. In fact, there are countless quantum nodes and quantum network base stations here, and Beihai has just fully enjoyed the convenience brought by them. For example? Wang Xingxiao asked very calmly. For example, East Island. The apostle said, for example, the silence of East Island in the final battle. From your point of view, it's because Xianyuan Wuxiang hacked into the network system of East Island with technology, and controlled all the communication signals and weapons control rights of the whole East Island. But in fact he's not good at this. Maybe he has similar equipment, but he can't do it so flawlessly. Strictly speaking, he activated the nodes of the quantum network, let the quantum network cover the whole East Island, replaced the internet of East Island, and intercepted and tampered with a lot of information. That's why the weapon system of East Island was completely silent. In fact, East Island didn't know the real situation until the end of the final battle. Before the end of the final battle, they always thought that they had the upper hand in the final battle of Beihai. Xinyuan Wuxiang? Wang Xingxiao raised his eyebrows. Big shot. The apostle answered without hesitation. Even in our eyes, he's a big shot second only to His Majesty and Her Highness Qin Weibai. He's the fat man you saw in Emperor Dong's palace. Wang Xingxiao didn't dwell on this. He just asked, does Beihai's quantum network technology come from Xinyuan Wuxiang? He's a doctor like me, but he doesn't have the ability in this area. Saint, who was flipping through the book, said softly, he should have done it with some tools. What he's done now is just to protect the database of Emperor Dong's palace. He has no way to invade it again. What about you? Wang Xingxiao turned to look at the apostle. He saw the metal ball that the apostle threw casually turn into Megatron with his own eyes. He saw some light screens floating around him and he saw a lot of data flowing on the light screens. Wang Xingxiao couldn't understand what it was for a moment, but the inexplicable sense of technology was obvious. Quantum network was undoubtedly also technology, and it was the technology fantasy of most countries. Then, what about the apostle? The apostle was silent for a long time, and then he smiled bitterly. I'm a good-for-nothing now, or as His Highness said, a juggler. His smile was extremely bitter, and there was a touch of suppressed anger in it. A good-for-nothing? No, of course not a good-for-nothing. They followed Lin Shi from the God of War's realm to the territory of the spacetime corridor. Although there were only 2 people, they were personally chosen by the God of War. Whether they were apostles or saints, they could be said to be big figures in the entire God of War's realm. Lin Shi, apostle and saint. The 3 of them were at the same level, but they had completely different focuses. Saint was a doctor, and his frontal combat ability was not outstanding. Lin Shi was good at frontal attacks and he would face Li Tianlan head-on. Until he died or Li Tianlan left here. Under normal circumstances, the combination of these 2 people was enough. Apostle? Only the apostle. His arrival was not only to strengthen this small team, but also to some extent to cover up and prevent some of the worst situations. Although he and Lin Shi were at the same level, in terms of pure destructive power and comprehensive combat ability in all aspects, the apostle had an absolute advantage. Under normal circumstances, the 3 of them could have directly used the apostle's ability to stand firm the moment they chose a place to stay. Why did they need to cooperate with Wang Xingxiao? The relationship between the God of War's realm and the Emperor Palace? This was the reason why Lin Shi covered up the Wang family of Beihai, but it was definitely not the reason for their cooperation. But who could have thought that the moment they entered Miracle City, they encountered an accident that no one, including the God of War, expected? The Princess Royal of the Spacetime Corridor stood in front of them. Her warnings might not be obvious, but all of them were aimed at the apostle, and it could even be said that she completely blocked the apostle's firepower. Just like the off-road vehicle they were riding in now. Even Sky Hunter before he transformed. He looked mighty and domineering, but what was the use? Not to mention the planetary level or even stellar level weapons like the Dark Matter Star Destroyer cannon, even the most basic weapon system on Sky Hunter had been put away. The off-road vehicle seemed to be speeding on the grassland, but in fact, Sky Hunter's thinking center was conveying the feeling of protest to him every minute and second. But what could he do? The apostle was completely sure that as long as he dared to show the true form of Sky Hunter, he didn't even need to do anything, and the killing intent from the Princess Royal would appear immediately. At that time, not to mention him, even Lin Shi and Saint would not be able to escape. That Princess Royal even showed a posture of not hesitating to fight with the God of War here. What could he say? What else did he dare to say? He could only hold it in. So now he could only modify such an off-road vehicle and could only use the quantum network to bring Wang Xingxiao and Lin Shi from Tianan to West Africa. He couldn't make any aggressive posture. This thing looked fancy but actually could not hurt anyone. If it wasn't like a piece of trash who played juggling, what was it? Now he was just hiding and slacking the whole time. Unless Lin Shi and Saint were desperate, it would be difficult for them to gain a foothold here in a short time. Looking for Wang Xingxiao and cooperating with the Wang family of Beihai was the best way. He can provide us with some confidential information we need, Lin Shi said. Lin Shi said. He did not deny the value of an apostle, but now it seemed that this was his greatest value. For example, what you see. Wang Xingxiao subconsciously looked down at the notebook in his hand again. It's impossible for us to break through the network protection of Emperor Dong's palace now, so we can't get in touch with their core database. But some things can always be investigated from another angle. Lin Shi said blandly, starting from the Flourishing Age Fund, we investigated certain interactions between all partners of the Flourishing Age Fund and other enterprises, and found some very interesting things and a lot of secret agreements. I can tell you with certainty that the scale of the Appreciation Fund is not what it looks like now. The strength of the Flourishing Age Fund is much more terrifying than what it shows now. The military counselor is not just in finance. Specifically, in Jianghu State, among the listed groups that many of us have heard of, nearly 30 of them are secretly controlled by the Flourishing Age Fund, and they are completely controlled. The multiple investments seem complicated, but in the final analysis, they all come from different directions of the Flourishing Age Fund. The 30 large listed groups are involved in energy, insurance, healthcare, internet, real estate, transportation, aviation, media, automobiles, international trade, machinery manufacturing, electronic communications, and even military fields. They are everywhere. The 30 groups that are secretly controlled by the Flourishing Age Fund are also constantly investing in some small and medium-sized groups. Just within Jianghu State, the Flourishing Age Fund has formed a very complicated multi-industry industrial chain, which covers the 6 major groups. Even many people, including the bosses of some small and medium-sized groups, don't necessarily know that their big boss is the Flourishing Age Fund. This force is extremely complicated, and it's hard for us to sort it out in a short period of time. But what is certain is that once this force breaks out, the impact will be unimaginable. Countless fields are constantly radiating in Jianghu State, using money as the most basic driving force, absorbing, and even creating everything they need. Stars, scholars, officials, elites of various industries, money converge and resources are used interchangeably. Everyone is pursuing a kind of interest or a kind of goal. Everyone has different goals. The more money, the bigger the circle and the wider the members. Your needs are completely easy for another person in the circle, and his needs are also solved by another person. Exchange, mutual assistance, as long as it's a reasonable need, there's nothing that can't be solved. If there really is, then people who can solve the problem will be pulled into this circle again. Lin Shi's voice suddenly paused. He looked up at Wang Xingxiao and asked with burning eyes, "What do you think it is like?" "Society." Wang Xingxiao, whose face had already changed, said in a dry voice, "Small society. And it's a capital-oriented society. When this society develops to a certain extent, almost no one can refuse its pull. At the beginning, it needs a lot of wealth, but this wealth begins to be injected into different things with the expansion of the circle. The more factors are injected, the crazier and crazier the expansion will be, and more concealing. Those who are drawn in may not need money, but they may need power, fame, beauty, and many other things. There will always be something they need. As long as they accept this need, they will naturally enter this circle in order to get more of what they need, and their own existence will become the needs of others. Society needs transactions, order, social strata, and capital. The first to join this circle are those who have already gained benefits. They bring capital and get benefits, and they will continue to maintain the stability, so they form order and form the initial social strata. People keep coming in, transactions keep happening, the social strata become more and more obvious, and the order becomes more and more stable. Everyone in this circle gets the benefits they want because they pay something they can give. Pay and get back. Everything looks very fair, and there are no traps because it's the huge capital that maintains all this. The Flourishing Age Fund has become the person who controls most of the capital in this small society. Everyone here is not his confidant or subordinate, but they can all become his capital and his pawns. Some of them may notice it or they may not, but it doesn't matter because in such a more and more stable order, even if they are used they can get back. A loose, invisible, but incomparably huge and lively small society that is almost impossible to destroy. Lin Shi quietly concluded, "It's not a genius idea, but the initial construction must be extremely difficult, and it takes a lot of effort. For this alone, Her Highness Qin Weibai is amazing, very amazing, because this system can be applied to almost any form of society. It's like a knife. It may not be sharp, but it's everywhere. In this small society, everyone can be regarded as the peripheral forces of Emperor Dong's palace, and they can be regarded as the foundation of Emperor Dong's palace. As time goes by, this society becomes more and more stable. The next development of Emperor Dong's palace is beyond Beihai's imagination. Beihai seemed to have such a plan hundreds of years ago, but it was detected and stopped by Jianghu state, and now, Lin Shi did not continue. But Wang Xingxiao knew very well what he was going to say. It was too late. Everything was too late. When this small society developed to this point, it was meaningless to stop it. Before the final battle of Beihai there might be room for all this. But with the victory of the final battle of Beihai, the Prince Group was about to be suppressed in all aspects, and even the Special Warfare Group was facing the risk of falling apart. The rise of the new group was equivalent to Emperor Dong's palace bringing a part of this small society from the invisible state to everyone. And when the whole small society was exposed, Wang Xingxiao suddenly froze. "You've thought of it?" Lin Shi laughed. "When this small society completely appears in front of everyone, Emperor Dong's palace will become another Beihai province, and it will be in a state more cohesive than Beihai province. It will be absolutely stable and His Majesty will be absolutely powerful." What does this mean? What did it mean? Everything was very clear. In that case, Emperor Dong's palace would no longer need Beihai. At that time, Zhongzhou state would no longer need Beihai. Because in the face of such a Emperor Dong's palace, checks and balances were meaningless, because there was no way to do so. Emperor Dong's palace would completely crush Beihai, crush it and swallow it. Zhongzhou state would adapt to it. Because in that state, Emperor Dong's palace would be very similar to Beihai. It would look like Beihai had changed its surname from Wang to Li, and moved from Beihai to Tianan. Everything would come naturally. When Her Highness Qin Weibai made this plan, it was not because she couldn't think of a better way to imitate Beihai. On the contrary, I think she wanted to naturally replace you. Lin Shi said slowly. Wild ambition. Wild ambition. Wang Xingxiao's face was livid. I haven't finished yet. Lin Shi's voice was disturbing. This is only a part of Zhongzhou state. It turns out that the Flourishing Age Fund has also invested a lot overseas in recent years. They are also secret investments, which means that Emperor Dong's palace also hides a very powerful force overseas. The so-called Flourishing Age Fund is like an iceberg on the sea. What everyone sees is just the tip of the iceberg. Wang Xingxiao looked down at the documents on the screen. Just opening a few folders, his face had become completely gloomy. Emperor Dong's palace is not the only one with worse news. Lin Shi said slowly, we can't underestimate Jianghu. A piercingly cold killing intent flashed in his eyes. This could even be said to be one of his main tasks here. But this task was not a request of the War God Realm, but a clear request of the War God Realm by the spacetime corridor. Anything that seemed inconceivable and incomprehensible was just because the level was not high enough. From the perspective of the War God Realm and the spacetime corridor, they could use the most scientific way to explain Qin Weibai's rebirth, spacetime travel and parallel universe. They knew very well why Qin Weibai's rebirth. But Jiang Shangyu's rebirth was an unexpected variable. Jiang Shangyu had the possibility of being reborn. Everyone had the possibility of being reborn. However, the probability, even if theoretically explained, was so small that it almost didn't exist. Even if this small and negligible probability really happened to Jiang Shangyu shouldn't have appeared here. He should have appeared in the miracle city that belonged to the God of War's realm and was separated by the God of War. It was obviously unusual for him to appear here. But the spacetime corridor had always been very cautious about this matter and did not probe too much. This now became Lin Shi's task. How to investigate something without intense probing was the most difficult. The simplest way that Lin Shi could think of was to kill Jiang Shangyu directly. But if Jiang Shangyu really had something worth probing, then it was obviously not easy to kill him. The cooperation between Jiang Shangyu and Li Guangtu is unlikely to be broken up at this stage. If your sword energy coat gathers again, you are currently stronger than either of them. But if they join forces, it will also be extremely troublesome for you. The Purgatory of Heaven capital is very strong, so is the Knights Templars. Moreover, there seems to be an interesting old guy in the Holy Land. If they stand together, they can still build a very terrifying joint force. Compared with the joint forces, Beihai does not have much advantage, but at least it is not a disadvantage, so. Emperor Dong's palace, the Wang family of Beihai, joint forces. You, His Majesty Li Tianlan Jiang Shangyu, you will be the focus of the dark world. I can't say that the Wang family of Beihai will inevitably be destroyed, but if you want to deal with the current situation, your pressure will undoubtedly be greater. You need my help. I need a clear position. This is the basis of our cooperation. Three-party struggle for hegemony. It sounds a bit like the romance of the Three Kingdoms. Who can defeat the heroes in the world? Chao Lu? The apostle, who had been learning about all aspects of information, laughed. A son should be like Sun Zhongmo? Lin Shi looked at Wang Xingxiao with a smile. What do you think? Think? Wang Xingxiao did not. He just felt the pressure. The incomparably huge pressure once again completely enveloped his whole body. How do you want to cooperate? Wang Xingxiao asked slowly after a long silence. After a pause, he changed his approach. Or what do you need? Everything. It was logical and expected. Lin Shi smiled and made a request that seemed to be demanding an exorbitant price. I need everything: money, talents, intelligence, connections, everything. I need them. Wang Xingxiao looked at Lin Shi expressionlessly. The apostle kindly reminded him, the Wang family of Beihai seems to have a good army on the Afro-continent? Wang Xingxiao's facial muscles suddenly twitched. The Divine Martial Army. This was a super army that had been passed down in Beihai for hundreds of years. It had always been one of the most powerful forces on the Afro-continent. Its history even predated the history of Beihai province. It was an army of more than 400,000 soldiers. Perhaps the overall quality of the Divine Martial Army was not as good as that of the Beihai Corps and the Border Control Corps, but this kind of super large army could be said to be a trump card anywhere. Beihai had always attached great importance to the Divine Martial Army. For many years, whether it was armaments, logistics, or personnel treatment, they were all very top-notch. Such a super-large integrated army was synonymous with invincibility on the Afro-continent. Yes. Lin Shi nodded and said, that army is good. You want the Divine Martial Army? The question in Wang Xingxiao's tone was extremely strong. Yes and no. Lin Shi said flatly, we want the Divine Martial Army, but it's not just the Divine Martial Army. A Divine Martial Army and more. Do we have to give you half of Beihai before we are satisfied? Wang Xingxiao was so angry that he laughed. What about you? What can you give Beihai? Saint closed the book and looked at Wang Xingxiao. We can help you treat your father, Wang Tianzong. Chapter 1060. Heal Wang Tianzong. For the Wang family of Beihai, just a few simple words contained a fatal attraction. However, Wang Xingxiao seemed to have experienced too many accidents today, so even if he heard that the other party could help him heal his father, his expression didn't change much. He just raised his eyelids and glanced at Lin Shi. Lin Shi calmly changed Saint's statement and said with a smile, to be exact, we can help you heal your father, Wang Tianzong. Ill. These were two completely different concepts. Wang Xingxiao's body finally moved. He looked at Lin Shi and asked, how long do you need? In 5 years at least and 10 years at most, we can guarantee that the Sword Emperor's injury will be completely healed. Lin Shi's voice was clear and light, but it was with absolute confidence. In fact, it was not difficult to heal Wang Tianzong, but it was definitely not easy either. Wang Tianzong's injury was not the most important thing. Although his injury seemed to be very serious, it was not a problem in the eyes of Saint. Wang Tianzong's biggest problem was the reason for his injury. The video of the Eternal Sword over Mormons could still be found in some secret channels. Lin Shi had watched that sword countless times. How amazing that sword was. Lin Shi couldn't describe it in words. It was indeed a sword, but it was equivalent to the double damage of King Guard sword energy and the real brand. If he treated it correctly with authority, the authority of that sword had even exceeded the 5th level. For Miracle City, this was absolutely an unprecedented sword, a peak that could not be surpassed. Even if his father came here in person and tried his best, it would probably be the same. Saint could heal Wang Tianzong's internal and external injuries, but he needed a certain amount of time to carefully repair the damage caused by the real brand. Of course, this time would not be as long as 5 to 10 years. Seriously, if Saint tried his best to help Wang Tianzong stand up again, it would only take about 8 to 10 months, no more than a year at most. 5 to 10 years. This was the time that Lin Shi needed, and also the time that Lin Shi speculated that Li Tianlan needed. Not to mention Li Tianlan, the majesty that Li Tianlan represented had always been one of the most respected people in Lin Shi's life. He was also the most respected person in his father, even his grandfather, and even the entire human clan. Everyone. No one wanted to be his enemy. There was no one. Lin Shi wanted to sharpen himself with the help of His Majesty's recovery, so he had no intention of making trouble for His Majesty. In Lin Shi's estimation, with Li Tianlan's current state, it would take him about 5 to 10 years to continue to break through to the next step, and then it would take him about 10 years to reach the perfect state that everyone expected and return smoothly. At that time, it was entirely possible to cure Wang Tianzong. I know what you're thinking. Lin Shi said calmly, but your idea is wrong. There are some documents about the Wang family of Beihai in the notebook in your hand, including the plan for the new generation of immortality that we just found. The direction of this plan is correct, but in our opinion, even if you can still avoid detours in the following time, it will take at least nearly 40 years to succeed. Remember, I'm only talking about the success of the new generation of eternal life. I can tell you responsibly that the new generation of eternal life cannot completely solve the Sword Emperor's problem. It can only solve a part of it because your current research lacks the most crucial truth. Based on the progress of your research, you might not even be able to come into contact with this point in the endless years to come. Real? Wang Xingxiao asked confusedly. Lin Shi stopped explaining. This is not a problem you should care about. He said softly, what you should care about now is the situation of the Wang family of Beihai. I don't know how much you know about Her Highness Qin Weibai. I can only say that the Her Highness everyone knows is not the one accompanying His Majesty Li Tianlan now. Although that one can't be said to be fake, the real Her Highness is now recuperating in the European land. Her state is very strange. She is in a state where she can be saved but can't be saved. And there are some things that even Shenyuan Wushang can't say. You can imagine what the situation of Beihai will be when His Majesty knows the truth. His Majesty doesn't know for now, but it doesn't mean that he won't know in the future. At least Jiang Shangyu is very likely to tell him. Wang Xingxiao was silent. Of course he knew about Qin Weibai. It was Summer Solstice who told him. You are no match for His Majesty, so you need us. It happens that we also need the support of Beihai. I can help you resist some of the pressure and even help you cure the Sword Emperor. What are you hesitating about? Wang Xingxiao felt a little uncomfortable in his heart. Straight it was not until he heard Lin Shi's words again that he understood what was wrong. The Sword Emperor of Zhongzhou State, Wang Tianzong. From beginning to end, the three people in front of him seemed to be very polite when they mentioned his father, calling him the Sword Emperor, but it was just pure politeness without any respect. Instead, when it came to Li Tianlan, no matter who the three of them were, when they mentioned Li Tianlan, they would instinctively call him Your Majesty. Wang Xingxiao gritted his teeth subconsciously. Compared with the 400,000 troops of the Divine Martial Army or the Sword Emperor, which one is more important in your heart? Lin Shi asked. Wang Xingxiao took a deep breath and didn't speak for a while. As a son, he would choose the latter without hesitation. But as the patriarch of the Wang family of Beihai, how could he answer this question? And I don't think you have any other choice now. Lin Shi continued. Beihai is far from the end of the road. Wang Xingxiao's face was cold. That's true. But if it really comes to that, our cooperation will be meaningless. Lin Shi nodded and said. Wang Xingxiao continued to be silent. After a long time he suddenly asked, You said that you are all from the Lin clan? Lin Shi froze and nodded. Sort of. Sort of? Wang Xingxiao questioned. I am a direct descendant of the Lin clan, and they are the retainers of the Lin clan. It's not wrong to say that we are from the Lin clan, but my seniority in the Lin clan seems to be a little high. Lin Shi hesitated, as if he didn't know how to express it. The God of War was the origin of the Lin clan and the God of War's realm. As the son of the God of War, his seniority, he shook his head in confusion. The Divine Martial Army? Wang Xingxiao took a deep look at Lin Shi. I can give it to you, but I have a request. Say it. Lin Shi said calmly. I need to know your origins, your specific abilities, and your specific goals. We can cooperate and Beihai can support you, but you must show enough sincerity. You can let me rest assured of your sincerity in cooperating with you. Wang Xingxiao said seriously. Chapter 1061. The off-road vehicle went all the way forward. The atmosphere in the car was silent. Lin Shi, the apostle, and saint were all silent and did not say a word. Wang Xingxiao looked at them and his eyes gradually became cold. I think, his voice was slow and a little cold. This is not an excessive request. His request was indeed not excessive, and it could even be said to be the most basic request. Wang Xingxiao cooperated with them in many ways. Lin Shi chose to make an exorbitant demand. He asked for more than 400,000 elite troops of the Divine Martial Army, and more than that, he also asked for money and resources. Such a price was just to support an ally. Even for the Wang family of Beihai, it was quite a crazy thing. A Divine Martial Army represented at least a quarter of the military strength of the Wang family of Beihai. Even a fool knew what it meant. No superpower needed to use its own resources or even spend a lot of money to support an ally. Wang Xingxiao could give them these things, because he valued the abilities of the three people. Lin Shi had already shown his strength the moment he pulled him from Tiannan to Africa. The apostle's method of making transformers was also enough to stun people. As a doctor, Seng could be called a miracle-working doctor in this era. From Tiannan to West Africa in an instant, this was a technology that surpassed countless years of this era, and even the people of this era had never thought about it. And the quantum network that was currently in the state of scientific fantasy, and so on. The Wang family of Beihai needed these technologies, which was also what Wang Xingxiao valued the most. Otherwise, it would be meaningless to cooperate with these three people. Since he valued these technologies and abilities, Wang Xingxiao naturally needed to further understand them in detail to reconfirm their value. As allies, Wang Xingxiao also needed to know where they came from and what they were going to do, and they didn't need to hide it. If they were not willing to disclose these things, then how much sincerity did they have in this so-called cooperation? This is really not an excessive request. Lin Shi was silent for a while and said slowly, "So?" Wang Xingxiao asked. "But we can't say too much." Lin Shi said slowly, thinking, and suddenly asked, "Is there any war palace on Mount Dibing now?" Wang Xingxiao was stunned. War palace. He was naturally familiar with this term. Anyone who knew the history of the Wang family of Beihai was familiar with it. That was the most glorious history of the Wang family of Beihai. It was also the first part of history. Beihai had a thriving population. In its hundreds of years of history, there was basically no situation in which the younger generation was alone. Even the lineal patriarchs mostly had brothers and sisters, such as Wang Xingxiao and Wang Yuetong of this generation. For example, Wang Tianzong and Wang Xiaoyao of the previous generation. When Wang Yuetong was in Beihai, she was jokingly called the little princess of Beihai. Before Wang Tianzong fell down, Wang Xiaoyao, who seemed to be ignorant and cynical most of the time, was called King Xiaoyao of Beihai. Perhaps this was a joke, but no one would deny the nobility of their status. There were many generations of princes and princesses in the history of the North Sea, and they all made important contributions to the development of the North Sea. As for the War Palace, this was the residence of the most important lord in Beihai so far in Mount Dibing. He was a lord recognized by people in several eras in the Dark World. In the hearts of Beihai people, he was a great man who could be described as great. He was the god of war recognized by everyone. He was the only name on Mount Dibing Mount Xiaoxiong that could be ranked with the ancestor who founded Beihai province. That was the early days of Beihai. He and the ancestor of Beihai pushed Beihai to the peak of the Dark World. After the ancestor of Beihai died, he alone guarded the Wang family of Beihai for nearly 100 years. In his era, the Wang family of Beihai, which was carried by him alone, was not afraid of any opponent, any force, any country. That was the era when Beihai was truly invincible. The War Palace belonged to the god of war of the Wang family of Beihai, the god of war Lin Shenyuan. He was also the ancestor of the Lin clan and the founder of Zhuanyuantai of the Li family. In the history of the Wang family of Beihai, he was the only Wang with a different surname. For hundreds of years, there was no second god of war in the Wang family of Beihai. But the War Palace, which had always stood side by side with the Emperor Palace, had always stood on Mount Dibing. In the wind and rain, the Wang family of Beihai would carefully protect any damage as soon as possible, as if guarding the most important treasure. His name was engraved on stone of formidable person, ranked with the ancestors of Beihai. As long as the history of Beihai was talked about, the patriarchs of Beihai would not hesitate to praise the glory of the god of war. His spirit tablet was placed in the ancestral hall of the Wang family of Beihai and worshipped day and night. His name in Beihai province had almost become a legend that belonged to the people of Beihai. But, even when Beihai and the Lin clan gradually drifted apart and became enemies with the Li family, the glory of this name had never been covered. Wang Xingxiao's eyes dimmed slightly, and his whole body showed a touch of undisguised bitterness. But the War Palace was gone. It had always existed until more than 2 years ago. But now, the entire Mount Dibing was gone. The War Palace and the Emperor Palace were all gone. Wang Xingxiao was silent for a long time before he said softly, "It's still there. There may be some changes, but the real War Palace, the real god of war, has always been in the hearts of everyone in Beihai." Lin Shi smiled. His eyes seemed to soften for a moment, and his voice was slightly relaxed. "I agree. The War Palace is also in our hearts. It's hard for me to explain in detail to you when you ask about our origin, but I can tell you that we are from the god of war realm." Wang Xingxiao narrowed his eyes, hesitated, and asked, "The god of war realm?" Lin Shi said yes. "I've never heard of the name of this force." Wang Xingxiao paused and suddenly said, "A few years ago, Jianghu also set up an organization called 3,000 Realms. 3,000 Realms? A few years ago? Lin Shi's eyes suddenly flashed with an incomparably sharp killing intent. About 4 years ago? At that time he was still studying in the Deep Sea Academy. Wang Xingxiao replied. 3,000 Realms? 3,000 Realms? Lin Shi murmured the word and his voice became colder and colder. It's really a name full of the style of the Shadow Camp. What? Wang Xingxiao asked again. Nothing. Lin Shi gradually restrained his killing intent, and he shook his head slightly. Chapter 1062. Tell me about the War God's realm. Wang Xingxiao thought for a while, came to his senses and asked calmly, where is the War God's realm? I can't say. Lin Shi looked at Wang Xingxiao and said seriously, I dare not say. Dare not. Wang Xingxiao had an obvious incomprehensible emotion. There are some things I can't say. There are some things I dare not say. There are some things that you can't hear even if I say them. Lin Shi shook his head. We have a lot of technologies that you don't have now. I mean you, not just the Wang family of Beihai. You can imagine as much as you want, no matter how absurd it is. We will find many things incredible just because we don't understand them. The so-called don't understand has two meanings. The first is that it hasn't been discovered, so you don't understand. The second is that for some reason, you don't understand itself, which is meaningful, protection or something else. Maybe we can use the method of elimination. When all the impossible is eliminated, the remaining answer, no matter how incredible or absurd, is the true answer. Lin Shi's voice was very soft, very slow, and very careful, as if he was testing something. There was a slight pause in every word he uttered, which sounded extremely broken. Wang Xingxiao was silent. When Lin Shi spoke, he could clearly see a touch of anger and helplessness in his eyes. The other party was obviously worried about something, so this was not a hint, but it was all he could say. But what was the other party worried about? The War God's realm. The War God's realm? If I say it, will there be any consequences? Wang Xingxiao asked silently. I will die. Lin Shi's voice was very calm. It's a real death. Who will kill you? Wang Xingxiao's pupils contracted slightly, and he suddenly felt that everything around him had become a little strange. Lin Shi was silent for a long time. He raised his head, looked away from Wang Xingxiao, and looked in a direction of nothingness. His expression became solemn. Your Highness, I will take him away. This is not only the will of my father but also the will of my grandfather. It was silent. There was no change in the surrounding space. Lin Shi's words seemed to be spoken to the air. Wang Xingxiao looked at Lin Shi strangely, full of doubts. Where is this guy taking me? Who was this so-called highness? It might not be too formal, but here I can be his guide. Lin Shi said to himself, I'll take it that you agree. There was still no sound. Lin Shi really looked like he was talking to himself. He was a little embarrassed and a little silly. Lin Shi took a deep breath and quietly clenched his fists. Although the elder princess from the space-time corridor didn't answer, he was sure that she was looking at him. No matter how hard he tried to hypnotize himself, he couldn't get used to the feeling of being exposed to someone else's eyes. Suppressing his anger, Lin Shi looked at Wang Xingxiao thoughtfully and did not speak for a while. Guide. This sounded like a trivial identity, but in fact, it was not trivial. For anyone, this was an opportunity to touch the top. Every guide had to go through countless repetitive competitions and learn a vast amount of information. How to guide a peak expert was not an easy task, especially when they had yet to realize the truth of the world. They had to know what to say, what not to say, and when to play dumb. They had to have a firm grasp of propriety. If they made the slightest mistake, they might be consigned to eternal damnation. If it was something unimportant, it wouldn't matter. At most, the person who said it would be speaking, but the other party wouldn't be able to hear their own voice, or their voice would be distorted into countless tiny syllables. However, if they really said something that they shouldn't say, then it would be death and destruction. No one could save the speaker and the listener. No one could save them. Lin Shi knew that his statement was ridiculous. The guide. For a very long time, there were only two real guides in the space-time corridor in the War God's realm. It was the 9th Prince, Xianyuan Wuxiang, who came to the space-time corridor to guide His Majesty. The status of a prince of the space-time corridor was self-evident. And the guide of the War God's realm was Xianyuan Luanhui, the first disciple of the War God's realm. The War God's realm was a little worse than the space-time corridor. The first disciple of the War God's realm sounded a little worse than the 9th Prince. But Xianyuan Luanhui's reputation was much better than Xianyuan Wuxiang's. the first disciple of the war god's realm, Xianyuan Luanhui. He was known as the first celestial master of the human clan. From the looks of it, there were only these two who could truly take on the responsibility of guiding the way. Lin Shi's self-proclaimed guide was ridiculous, and Wang Xingxiao was not qualified to be led by Lin Shi. But Lin Shi's attitude was very obvious. He used the inappropriate title of guide to express the attitude and importance of the war god's realm and the emperor palace to Wang Xingxiao. There was silence around. Lin Shi slowly let out a breath. Feng Qingwu's existence made him almost breathless. There were some things he couldn't say, but he dared not say them because of Feng Qingwu's existence. Now that he made his position clear, he got silence from the other party. This seemed to be a tacit agreement? He thought silently, and his eyes gradually became calm. Can you say it now? Wang Xingxiao, who had been silently watching his movements, suddenly asked. Still not. Lin Shi glanced at him and said, you need to continue to grow so I can tell you something, very limited things. Continue to grow? Wang Xingxiao frowned. When you reach the peak of the Sword Emperor realm, I can tell you. Lin Shi said calmly. Wang Xingxiao fell silent. After a long time he asked inexplicably, War Palace? Lin Shi nodded solemnly. War God's realm? Wang Xingxiao asked again. Lin Shi slowly raised his head and looked at him deeply without saying a word. Crack. A subtle sound rang out without any warning. It rang in front of Wang Xingxiao. Lin Shi's expression suddenly twisted for a moment, and he looked extremely painful. Wang Xingxiao's expression suddenly changed. In his perception, Lin Shi's aura was fluctuating wildly, and the subtle sound was getting louder and louder. It was the dense sound of bones cracking. Countless bones in Lin Shi's body seemed to be broken in the blink of an eye. Your Highness, don't go too far. His Highness Shi is... The apostle's expression suddenly changed and his eyebrows suddenly raised. An extremely bright light kept flashing in his eyes. The apostle's face was cold and he suddenly stretched out his palm. Don't move. Lin Shi's expression changed dramatically, and he let out a low roar in a hurry. Heaven and earth suddenly stopped for a moment. The apostle raised his palm, but he seemed to have forgotten what he was going to do, and his whole body froze in place. Wang Xingxiao watched the apostle's palm turn over. But he didn't see the moment his palm turned over, an extremely dazzling cannon muzzle shining with blazing white light appeared in his palm. The energy in the muzzle was surging and boiling. The apostle's palm, which was about to move forward, turned to himself without any hesitation. The muzzle was activated and the light shone. His palm hit his chest with a bang. The huge energy instantly shattered his heart, and the strong light penetrated through his back. The apostle's incomparably powerful aura instantly weakened and almost disappeared completely. Bang! The huge off-road vehicle that was automatically driven suddenly fell apart, and Wang Xingxiao and the others all fell on the grass. The wreckage of the off-road vehicle rolled around. A string of data flashed slightly on the wreckage for a moment, and then it was completely silent. Wang Xingxiao, whose pupils had contracted to the extreme, turned his head subconsciously. He saw the somewhat panicked saint prostrate herself on the ground and said in a trembling voice, Your Highness, please calm down. We can guarantee that this will not happen again. This is the last time. There was no sound. Everything stopped as if nothing had happened. Saint was not a stunning beauty, but her every move was extremely elegant. However, at this moment she no longer had the slightest bit of elegance. She scrambled to her feet and rushed to Lin Shi, pressing one hand on his chest. A pure and soft strong light burst out in an instant. In the light, the saint seemed to be divided into two. One stood in front of Lin Shi, and the other appeared in front of the apostle. The two beams of light rose at the same time and merged into one. A huge amount of energy continued to condense. Wang Xingxiao watched this scene silently, unable to say a word. After nearly half an hour, all the light slowly disappeared. The saint's face was pale. Half of it was because she was scared, and the other half was because she had consumed too much energy. Both Lin Shi and the apostle were seriously injured. Everything seemed to happen in the blink of an eye. But in that short period of time, all the organs in Lin Shi's body were deceived. All the organs thought that Lin Shi was in a state of breakthrough at the same time, so they desperately sent energy. At the same time, the energy that erupted almost completely destroyed Lin Shi's body. If it continued, Lin Shi would completely die in a few seconds. The apostle was even worse off. When Lin Shi was injured, he who had been enduring all this time, was obviously going to erupt with all his strength. However, this thought of his clearly completely angered the eldest princess. As a result, his thoughts were deceived and then his body was deceived. In that instant, his arm treated his own body as the enemy, the high-energy particle cannon in his palm almost self-destructing as it entered an overloaded state, directly firing it at himself at full force. The result was obvious. Under the high-frequency energy vibrations, all of the weapon systems in the Apostle's arm that was overloaded were completely destroyed, Heaven Hunter's shadow completely dying. That overloaded cannon even pierced through one of the Apostle's energy cores, his entire existence's logic even deviating. With the Holy Apostles around, he would not die. However, such a heavy price had caused his combat power to drop by a level. Even if his own level did not change, the current apostle had already fallen from the ranks of the top apostles to the level of a high-level apostle. If he wanted to recover, who knew how long it would take to research? The saint gasped for breath, his plump and proud chest rising and falling violently. He checked the state of the two again and then glared at Wang Xingxiao. "Did you see that?" A somewhat weak voice sounded behind the saint. Lin Shi wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and said softly, "There are some things that you can't understand now, so before you understand, you can't say what you shouldn't say. This is a warning. If she wants, she can completely deceive our brains and make our brains think that we are dead. Then we don't even know how we died." Wang Xingxiao tried his best to remain calm, but he was still in shock. The scene just now was so weird that he didn't even know who the enemy in the dark was. So, Wang Xingxiao was silent for a long time before he said softly, "You have restrictions, so what can you do now?" Lin Shi was silent. After a while, he said with a bitter smile, "We don't know either." They undoubtedly knew what their abilities could do. But the problem was that they didn't know what abilities His Highness, who was watching them, allowed them to use. Wang Xingxiao looked at Lin Shi, and he could clearly see the confusion in the other's eyes. Thinking of the scene just now, Wang Xingxiao felt a little cold, which was a chill from the bone. Wang Xingxiao frowned. He suddenly realized that if he didn't cooperate with Lin Shi and the others, would he? There is no if. Lin Shi shook his head. It's actually very simple for us to get rid of her. As long as we leave here, she won't bother to pay attention to us. Or we won't pay attention to Li Tianlan, and she won't do anything. But what about you? Can you guarantee that Beihai won't go against Emperor Dong's palace? Wang Xingxiao thought silently. After a while he slowly asked, "We went from Tiannan to West Africa. What the hell is going on?" Virtual shuttle. The apostle's weak voice sounded. "This is my ability." He threw a metal ball into the sky again. The metal ball instantly turned into another transformer. The transformer kept changing and once again became an off-road vehicle. The apostle carefully put away the remains of Sky Hunter's shadow, and his eyes were a little dim. "I can digitize an area and use the quantum network to build a transmission channel. During virtual shuttle, from a real point of view you exist, but from an objective point of view at that time, you are just a piece of data. West Africa and Emperor Dong's palace are two nodes. You can think of this distance as a data transmission between two nodes of the quantum network. That's why you are here." The apostle and the others sat back in the off-road vehicle and said calmly, "What is certain is that I can use this ability. So in terms of escape, we have rich channels and experience. Maybe in His Highness's heart, we only deserve to escape." The corner of Wang Xingxiao's mouth twitched. He couldn't understand how a living person could become data in an instant. Did it mean that as long as the apostle wanted to, he could become data and appear anywhere in the world at will? He shook his head subconsciously, thinking of the attack he had suffered a second before the virtual shuttle. Li Tianlan. If I'm not mistaken, Li Tianlan used? Wang Xingxiao said hesitantly. He used the 6 paths of reincarnation sword at that time. Lin Shi whispered. Wang Xingxiao's body finally couldn't help shaking. The 6 paths of reincarnation sword. This was the supreme unique skill of the Wang family of Beihai, and also the peak sword move in the dark world for hundreds of years. How could Li Tianlan use it? Moreover, Li Tianlan's 6 paths of reincarnation sword broke out in an instant, which showed that his mastery of this move was much better than Wang Xingxiao's. How was that possible? And what about the break of reincarnation that seemed to completely restrain the 6 paths of reincarnation sword? Did he imitate the 6 paths of reincarnation sword? Wang Xingxiao whispered to himself. The 24 moves of sword of the Li family were ever-changing. Starting from Li Kuangtu, the 24 moves of sword changed for the first time and turned into the Immortality seal. The comprehensive move of the Immortality seal, 9th Void and Infinity, was a unique skill that could imitate the opponent's sword energy. If Li Tianlan really understood the 24 moves of sword, he would naturally be familiar with Ninth Void and Infinity. It's not imitation. Lin Shi shook his head. That sword move is the real 6 paths of reincarnation sword. It's not imitation. At His Majesty's current level, many things are no longer a matter of whether he can do it or not, but whether he wants to do it or not. After a pause, Lin Shi whispered, maybe he has touched the truth of the world. When he said this, there was shock and admiration in his eyes that could not be concealed. Wang Xingxiao hesitated. I need to think about it. Go ahead. Lin Shi nodded. The off-road vehicle drove in silence. Lin Shi thought silently for a while and slightly grasped in the void. The empty air was instantly compressed. It turned into a pen and paper. The apostle raised his palm slightly. A piece of nanoparticles slowly formed in front of Lin Shi and turned into a desk. Lin Shi put the paper on the desk in front of him, picked up the pen and thought silently. He began to write the first letter to the War God realm after arriving in Miracle City. He knew that this could not escape Feng Qingwu's eyes. However, he could not change things, so he could only ignore them. We have to know a premise. The incorporeal pen sketched on the incorporeal paper. Since the beginning, there has never been a person like His Majesty Li Tianlan who died and came back. So even now, for us and for the corridor of time, His Majesty's existence is just an example. We don't know what incredible changes will happen. All we can do is speculate about His Majesty's way of returning based on all other examples. But I want to say that other examples are not comparable to His Majesty, so our speculations are seriously unconvincing. Since the beginning, more than one top figure has fallen and returned, but there is only one His Majesty. Our examples show that those people can only reach level 4, 5 at most after leaving the real environment. At this level, they can't even break the corridor of time and space, let alone compare with His Majesty. When His Majesty left Miracle City, he already had the record of level 4, 7, but Emperor Shenyuan in the corridor of time and space has not been restarted. That was the first time he left corridor of time and space. I have sufficient evidence to show that His Majesty's way of returning must be an incredible return. As the founder of the neutral camp power system of the human clan, he should have a stronger status and power than Emperor Shenyuan. As the first human emperor, maybe we don't need to wait too long for his return. Maybe we have all forgotten that His Majesty handed over his power to Emperor Shenyuan. Emperor Shenyuan became the new human emperor, but strictly speaking he still occupied the throne. Emperor, we can't be sure of the difference between these two positions for the time being, but I think there will always be a difference. The most important piece of evidence that I can state is that I can confirm that His Majesty now has the ability to touch the real world. What's even more unbelievable is that he has yet to break through to the 4th level of authority. Based on this alone, I personally believe that when His Majesty returns in the future, his authority will not be lower than the 7th level. This is a crazy speculation, but I firmly believe it. And from this point of view, I seem to be able to see His Majesty's way of returning. He can touch the real world when his authority has not reached level 4, and he can accommodate the real world in the shortest time possible. There is only one such way, and the name of the level 7 authority on this way is called Heaven's End. Maybe this is His Majesty's way of returning. Chapter 1063. The virtual lines that filled the sky quickly dissipated without a sound. The black sword energy surged and condensed into dark clouds high in the sky. A rain of swords fell in Emperor Dong's palace, dispersing all the killing intent. The rain of swords grew heavier and heavier, and the dark clouds under Li Tianlan's feet began to disappear. He stood on the dark clouds condensed by the black sword energy, bathing in the sun. His ruthless black windbreaker kept surging in the sky, and the slightly active golden patterns reflected the bright golden light in the sun. The light completely wrapped Li Tianlan, with a kind of awe-inspiring majesty that couldn't be looked at directly. Li Tianlan recalled the scene just now in silence. There was no sign at all. At first, the virtual line was like a one-dimensional line. Then, the virtual line expanded savagely and rapidly into a two-dimensional plane. The moment the light appeared in front of Li Tianlan, it expanded into a three-dimensional space. In other words, countless virtual lines completely replaced the surrounding space. The line kept expanding. It ignored everything and was unstoppable. In an instant, everything it came into contact with was turned into data. Only Li Tianlan himself became the center of the overwhelming data. Even his sword energy turned into pieces of data, so that it hurt Wang Xingxiao, who had been turned into data, and the dual pupils man who suddenly appeared to save him. Li Tianlan thought silently. He thought about a lot of things. His sword energy was turned into data. Li Tianlan vaguely felt that it should represent something. Countless ideas flashed in his mind, but he couldn't tell what it meant. That unimaginable virtual world was both familiar and disgusting to him. The familiar feeling was easy to explain. It seemed that Xinyuan Wuxiang had taken him from Beihai to Tiannan in the shortest time in this way. At that time, Li Tianlan was completely blurred, and he didn't even have a similar picture in his memory. He just felt that it was familiar. That was why the so-called familiar feeling came. But where did that feeling of disgust come from? It was completely like an instinct. When the virtual light appeared, Li Tianlan only felt anger and disgust. All the emotions became the most obvious rejection, so Li Tianlan directly broke out with all his strength without any hesitation. Subconsciously, he used the most powerful sword move in the shortest time. It was not until that sword move that he realized that he was using the 6 paths of reincarnation sword. In that instant, his attack was so natural it was simply... But before that, Li Tianlan was not familiar with the sword of 6 Daos of the Wang family of Beihai except for the sword of Emperor Path. What he was familiar with was the sword intent of the sword of 6 Daos. Li Tianlan didn't understand those virtual lights. If he started from himself, he finally determined the first change after his breakthrough. It was just like the natural 6 paths of reincarnation sword. At the moment of the sudden explosion, he had completely used the sword intent of the 6 Dao sword to construct the sword chi of the 6 Dao sword. Then he used the sword chi of the 6 Dao sword to grasp the way to use them. The final explosion was the perfect fusion of the 6 Dao sword chi, and it was sublimated to the extreme. Therefore, that sword was the real 6 paths of reincarnation sword. There was no imitation. It was the perfect 6 paths of reincarnation sword. This also meant that the Wang family of Beihai's sword of 6 paths of reincarnation was indeed flawless. At least from Li Tianlan's current height and perspective, he could not find any flaws in the sword of 6 paths of reincarnation. It was the strongest peak of swordsmanship in the Wang family of Beihai for hundreds of years. It was also the strongest peak in the dark world for hundreds of years. The strongest. This sword was well deserved. He could defeat Wang Xingxiao entirely because of Wang Xingxiao himself. It was because he was unfamiliar with the 6 paths of reincarnation sword. Li Tianlan thought that if he used the 6 paths of reincarnation sword with all his strength, it would be hard to say what the result would be when he used the break of reincarnation with all his strength. The dark cloud of sword energy turned into a soft rain of swords, from big to small, and finally turned into nothingness. Li Tianlan opened his palm. The sword energy gathered in his hand. It was not one after another. Instead, they were strung together piece by piece. He recalled all the opponents he had encountered, different unique skills, different sword energy, and different domains. Beihai, Mount Shu, Jade Pool, Kunlun City, the Jiang family of South America, Jifeng Sword Raining School, Wuji Palace. The 6 Path Sword, the Phantom Sword, the Nirvana Sword, the Great Void Sword, the 10th Unique Domain, the 30-meter Mortal World. He turned countless sword intents into the most basic energy. Different energy constructed different sword energy and combined them into different domains. Therefore, countless unique skills kept gathering, colliding, and simulating in Li Tianlan's hand. The most basic condition was consciousness. Consciousness. Li Tianlan was deep in thought. He still couldn't figure it out, but he vaguely grasped what he had gained after this breakthrough. His body slowly descended in the air. The sun over Emperor Dong's palace, which was still intact in the fierce battle, was bright and clear. Bathed in the sun, Li Tianlan landed in front of Xinyuan Wuxiang. Big brother is mighty. Xinyuan Wuxiang gave him a thumbs up and grinned. Li Tianlan also grinned. Perhaps it was because the fat man in front of him looked very funny, or perhaps it was because his temperament was relatively harmless. In short, Li Tianlan was not on guard against him. Even though he knew that his origin was unknown, even though the trigger for his breakthrough was the so-called specialty of his hometown that the other party gave him, even though he knew that his identity was not simple, Li Tianlan felt very relieved when facing him. Tianlan, where is Wang Xingxiao? Qin Weibai came over and asked softly. No one knew what had happened just now. For everyone, the battle ended abruptly. The vast black sword energy swept the sky and covered everything. No one knew what happened to Wang Xingxiao. This question was undoubtedly very important for the current Emperor Dong's palace. If Wang Xingxiao died, then a considerable part of Emperor Dong's palace's energy would be focused on the Wang family of Beihai. He was rescued. Li Tianlan shook his head. Rescued. Qin Weibai's expression was a little strange. Li Tianlan took a deep look at Xinyuan Wuxiang, who was smiling beside him. Others might not find the virtual light in the black sword energy, But Li Tianlan was sure that Xianyuan Wushang knew something. Military counselor. Li Tianlan suddenly spoke. Your Majesty. Military counselor came over and nodded. Get ready to go to Yuzhou with me later, Li Tianlan said. Military counselor nodded. Even though he had decided to retire, he still looked a little excited when he heard Li Tianlan's words. Li Tianlan obviously didn't want him to get ready alone. As the first chief administrative officer of Emperor Dong's palace, the future direction of Emperor Dong's palace was actually controlled by him. Countless resources were also deployed by him. Obviously, Li Tianlan wanted him to prepare a large team and get in touch with the secret forces of Emperor Dong's palace and Samsara Palace. This trip to Yuzhou was undoubtedly the time to reap the fruits of victory. Li Tianlan looked at Xianyuan Wushang and Xing Tian and nodded. Come with me. I need an explanation for something. Chapter 1064. It was quiet in the small reception room on the top floor of the castle. The smoke lingered in the air. Li Tianlan smoked and looked at Xianyuan Wushang, who was sitting in front of him. Qin Weibai sat next to Li Tianlan and also looked at the fat man attentively. Xing Tian stood motionless behind Xianyuan Wushang. His huge body was straight like a statue. The atmosphere was subtle and solemn. For both Qin Weibai and Li Tianlan, it was not until now that they could really calm down and think about something. It had been less than 24 hours since Xianyuan Wushang and Xing Tian arrived. But their appearance brought too many incredible and incomprehensible variables to Li Tianlan and Emperor Dong's palace. Their appearance was inexplicable, but their role was obvious. If Xing Tian's arrow in East Island hadn't changed those things, Li Tianlan wouldn't have been able to find the break of reincarnation all over the sky in a short time. So, when facing the sneak attack of Jiang Shangyu and Li Guangtu, he would have been in a real desperate situation. Without Xianyuan Wushang's so-called hometown specialty, he couldn't have broken through to the invincible realm now. So Li Tianlan was probably no match for Wang Xingxiao when he came to Emperor Dong's palace today. Li Tianlan's breakthrough was perfect. The burden on his body had been completely solved. His current physical strength was strong enough to support him to stabilize his current realm and even reach the peak of the invincible realm. If the realm he broke through to this time could still be called the invincible realm. Countless mysteries shrouded Xianyuan Wushang. Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai could both feel his kindness and closeness to Emperor Dong's palace. But they also wanted to know his origin and his various means. You saved me. Li Tianlan put out the cigarette in the ashtray in front of him and said softly. Xianyuan Wushang scratched his head honestly. You're my big brother. It's natural for me to save you. Yes. Li Tianlan nodded, narrowed his eyes and asked with a smile, then why am I your big brother? Big brother is big brother. What? Xianyuan Wushang looked surprised. This fat man is very good at pretending to be crazy. If he doesn't want to say, it's hard for us to get anything out of him. Qin Weibai said grumpily. Xianyuan Wushang laughed, looking very simple and honest. Then be more specific. From East Island to Beihai, from Beihai to Tianan, you took me here in a few minutes or even a few seconds. How did you do that? Li Tianlan asked calmly. After a pause, he continued, this is not martial arts. He sounded very sure. East Island, Beihai, Tianan. It was difficult for him to calculate the exact distance in such a short time, but he was sure that no martial arts could achieve this. Even if he had entered that supreme realm, even if he had reached the peak of that realm, it was still impossible for him to achieve this. It was not a lack of stamina. If Li Tianlan were to walk this distance, he could also reach the destination in a very short time. It would not be slower than taking a plane and he had enough physical strength. But the speed of the plane couldn't compare to Xianyuan Wushang's speed. Even Wu Qing, when fully charged, wouldn't be able to keep up with Xianyuan Wushang, let alone an airplane. It's a quantum network. Xianyuan Wushang's answer was very calm. He had nothing to hide from Li Tianlan. After all, this was his territory, the territory of the spacetime corridor. No one was watching him here, and he didn't want to pretend to be mysterious in front of Li Tianlan. He could say what he could, and there was nothing he could do if he couldn't. Li Tianlan didn't stare blankly. Neither did Qin Weibai. Quantum network. Different from the Wang family of Beihai at this stage, whether it was Emperor Dong's palace or the former Samsara palace, Qin Weibai and Li Tianlan didn't pay too much attention to it. It was a very strange term to them. So Li Tianlan nodded naturally and asked, what's that? According to the current understanding of the scientific community, to put it simply, it's a network that is tens of millions or even hundreds of millions of times faster than the current internet. But in fact it's not like that. The quantum network can't even be described as fast. It's a kind of synchronization that ignores distance. And I could use in that pair of glasses to build which is equivalent to a small base station. At that moment, I used to create a virtual quantum network space to replace the real one. That is, from that moment on, we were actually equivalent to two strings of data in the network. That kind of speed is equivalent to us in the quantum network space, and I sent a text message from Beihai to Emperor Dong's palace in Tianan. There was no delay regardless of distance, and it arrived instantly. Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai looked at each other, and their expressions were a little strange. Xinyuan Wuxiang looked at them quietly. Big brother, sister-in-law, do you understand? It's not that I don't want to say something, but even if I say it, you can't hear it. Li Tianlan looked around with no expression on his face. He could hear most of Xinyuan Wuxiang's words, but he couldn't hear any of the key words. He could see that Xinyuan Wuxiang was not perfunctory when he said those key words. But when his voice reached his ears, it completely turned into some fragmented noise, as if some words had been completely blocked. As it was shielded again and again, the surrounding space even began to change silently. Li Tianlan's second heart was slowly vibrating. Most of the time it was silent for a long time and would only beat once. It seemed to feel a great crisis and slowly woke up from the silence. Every wisp of air in the surrounding space seemed to be sharpening. Big brother, can you feel it? Xinyuan Wuxiang looked at Li Tianlan with a strange look in his eyes. Li Tianlan was silent for a while and then slowly said, "What is it?" He nodded at the surrounding air. This was not the answer, but it was the clearest answer. Xinyuan Wuxiang's pupils suddenly contracted for a very obvious moment. He looked at Li Tianlan seriously and said again, "You can feel it." Li Tianlan nodded and said yes. Xinyuan Wuxiang took a deep breath of the sharp air in the air. At the same time, Xing Tian's straight body slightly bent. "What is it?" Li Tianlan repeated his question. Xinyuan Wuxiang's eyes flickered. He lowered his head and was silent, as if he was hesitating. Li Tianlan glanced at him and didn't continue to ask. He just changed the topic. "You mean that the so-called quantum network was brought by you?" "Yes." Xinyuan Wuxiang nodded. "Then what happened just now? Who saved Wang Xingxiao? The method he used seems to be the quantum network you mentioned." Li Tianlan said. "It's different." Xinyuan Wuxiang shook his head. "The method is the same, but the way he used it is more natural and faster than mine. I built the quantum network with a prop, but in the other team, there is a person who has this ability. There is a big difference." "You know him?" Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes. "Who is he?" "His name is Lin Shi." Xinyuan Wuxiang said helplessly, "This is a deal. Big brother, you were seriously injured in Beihai. The medicine that can help you recover quickly is from Lin Shi's family, and the condition is that Lin Shi also comes here." "Then he chose the Wang family of Beihai?" Li Tianlan's voice was a little cold. "Just kill him." Xinyuan Wuxiang said casually, "This is just a deal. Now the deal is over. He chose the Wang family of Beihai, so he is the enemy. Big brother, you don't have to worry. Even his family can't say anything." "His family?" Li Tianlan frowned tightly. He remembered it clearly. The moment the virtual network world spread over, Lin Shi suddenly made his move. He also used the shatter of reincarnation. To some extent, his inheritance was the same as Li Tianlan's. His family is not to be trifled with. Xinyuan Wuxiang smiled. "But no matter what, they can't affect us here. In this matter, my family will fully support you. Compared with us, the power behind Lin Shi has risen for a short time. In terms of foundation, they are far inferior to us. To put it simply, even if the two strongest experts behind him join forces, they will not be a match for my father. In other aspects, they are even more inferior. It's just that the two experts behind Lin Shi have some special experiences and have great potential in the future. But in terms of potential, big brother, you are not afraid of anyone with your potential." Li Tianlan listened quietly and quickly digested the meaning of these words. "That is to say," Qin Weibai suddenly said, "your family is betting on Tianlan's future potential?" "Yes and no." Xinyuan Wuxiang's eyes were a little complicated. Big brother's potential has long been realized. What we are waiting for is for him to slowly walk to the position that belongs to him and take back what belongs to him. Family, he turned the dynasty into a family. But in the end, it was still the dynasty founded by Li Tianlan. The reason that the human clan could linger on until now had too much to do with the original majesty. Everything in the time corridor could be said to be Li Tianlan's. Can the opponent's quantum network be restrained? Li Tianlan suddenly asked. The concept of the so-called family just flashed in his mind. Li Tianlan was a little curious. But it was just pure curiosity. The breakthrough this time really made him stand at the peak. If he took another step forward, Li Tianlan was confident that no one would be a match for him. Then what was there to worry about the so-called family? Lin Shi's means were messy. If he really chose to stand on Beihai's side, Li Tianlan would certainly not let go of a chance. It's very difficult. Xianyuan Wushang shook his head. The so-called quantum network was all the means of the order camp. It was omniscient, omnipotent, and everywhere. The doomsday at the top of the order camp could make its army appear in any corner, including the time corridor. Virtual travel had always been one of the most unsolvable abilities. The only thing the time corridor could think of was to restrain it, reduce the network frequency to a certain extent, and even change the physical constants of some important places and so on. What they could do was to limit the strength of the opponent during virtual travel, but there was no way to prevent the opponent from appearing. It was just that the strength that Lin Shi displayed here was already so low that there was no way to restrain him. The only chance to kill him is to kill him with one blow, Xianyuan Wushang said. Li Tianlan nodded thoughtfully and fell silent. The sharpness in the air was still there. Every wisp of air and even every particle seemed to have a touch of sharpness. Li Tianlan felt a little uncomfortable all over. He pointed to the air in front of him again. What is this? Can't you tell? Xianyuan Wushang hesitated again. I can tell. He whispered, but big brother, are you ready? What do you mean? Li Tianlan asked. Xianyuan Wushang stretched out his hand. Give me your hand. Li Tianlan strangely reached out his hand and held it with him. The sharpness that kept swimming in the air seemed to be gradually increasing and more. Li Tianlan became more and more uncomfortable. What the hell is this? Xianyuan Wushang smiled. A clear light gushed out of his hand and completely enveloped Li Tianlan. It's malice. Xianyuan Wushang whispered. Bang. Li Tianlan's second heart suddenly beat. Xianyuan Wushang's voice continued. The malice of the world. Puff. The clear light completely enveloped Li Tianlan. Without warning, Li Tianlan's body became stiff. A large amount of blood gushed out of his body along with Xianyuan Wushang's voice. Chapter 1065. It was hard to tell what it felt like. There were no signs, vague, abrupt, and impossible to perceive. The moment Xianyuan Wushang's voice fell, all the blades in the surrounding space became extremely sharp. The air disappeared. In other words, all the air had turned into sharp knives at the microscopic level. Countless sharp knives pierced into his body. As he breathed, they went into his mouth and down his throat. Countless blades seemed to tear everything in his body apart. Every sharp knife seemed to have a soul. It was an extremely weak, almost imperceptible, but infinitely broad will. Cold, gloomy, disgusted, and angry. Everything became sinister in the shortest time possible, turning into the purest form of destruction. Or extermination. Blood gushed out. It gushed out from Li Tianlan's chest and back. It was an extreme viciousness like a curse. Almost in an instant, Li Tianlan suffered unimaginable damage all over his body. Sharp pain swept through him. His mind was clearer than ever. He tightened his grip on his hand. Xianyuan Wushang held his hand tightly. Xianyuan Wushang's body was also gushing with blood. In Li Tianlan's eyes, Xianyuan Wushang's facial features were even cracking bit by bit. His skin was torn open, and tiny but deep lines of blood spread unscrupulously on his face, like centipedes. His body kept shaking in the great injury, but the clear light in his hands kept boiling, completely enveloping the two of them. The light flowed into their wounds, and the enormous energy nourished everything with unimaginable vitality. Their wounds healed and were torn open again and again. In Li Tianlan's sight, Xianyuan Wushang's twisted face turned up slightly, revealing a terrifying sneer. It was unyielding, contempt, and a kind of frivolity and arrogance that came from the bones. His distorted voice came intermittently, "World? Come on." Li Tianlan looked at him quietly. This was the ugliest and most terrifying smile he had ever seen. But in that trembling voice, there was a kind of tenacity that could almost touch the soul. It was a spirit that struggled every moment and never gave up. Li Tianlan's body could not move or exert force. All his martial arts, sword chi, energy, domain, everything was completely frozen and solidified. Bang! Xing Tian's huge body collapsed to the ground. His incomparably thick arms had even sunk into the floor, and countless streams of blood were also flowing from his body. It seemed that everyone who heard Xianyuan Wushang's words were suffering unbearable consequences. Or perhaps he had to bear the malice of this world. Everyone, Everyone, Li Tianlan's heart suddenly trembled. His body was shaking with all his might, and the wind and thunder veins in his body had been stretched to the extreme. Little by little, he slowly turned his head and looked to his side. By his side, it was Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai was still sitting on the sofa. Her carefully combed hair was elegantly combed, and the moon-white cheongsam wrapped her delicate body, which could make Li Tianlan crazy every time. The sunlight outside the window shone into the small reception room and shone on her smooth arms, reflecting the soft and white luster that made his mouth dry. At this moment, she gently pressed her forehead with one arm, and she seemed to be at a loss. There was no blood, no pain, and Qin Weibai was surrounded by peace. Li Tianlan breathed a sigh of relief. Qin Weibai shook her head subconsciously. She seemed to still be in a daze, looking in Li Tianlan's direction with some confusion. They looked at each other for a moment. Li Tianlan's vision went black. No, it was the whole world that was abrupt. His face darkened. Darkness occupied all his consciousness, and the whole world seemed to be slowly rotating in darkness. The pain all over his body disappeared completely. Li Tianlan seemed to have lost control of his body. In the darkness he could not feel his body, but his consciousness was still active. Darkness filled everything. There was no front or back, no left or right, no direction, and no up or down. Li Tianlan suddenly thought of a question. When humans lost their bodies and were only left with a vague consciousness, what was the meaning of front or back, left or right, up or down, fast or slow for a mass of consciousness? This question was simple and profound. When Li Tianlan began to think, his consciousness suddenly seemed to be pulled toward a certain direction. The feeling of being pulled was extremely real. But whether he was close or not, what did it mean to his consciousness? In his consciousness he saw endless light. It was gorgeous and dazzling light, occupying everything. Below the light was a dark light layer. Just a thought flashed in Li Tianlan's consciousness, and all the light had disappeared again. His consciousness was pulled into the light layer and then fell quickly. The light was getting fainter and fainter. The darkness was getting thicker. The silent darkness seemed to absorb all the light, and his falling speed kept accelerating. Silence, long and eternal. In the endless silence and darkness, Li Tianlan's consciousness kept falling at an accelerated pace. This experience was so familiar. Absolute silence and darkness. It was very much like what he had encountered in the underground maze of the desert prison. But compared with the despair at that time, everything was more silent now. In that labyrinth, the only sounds he could hear were his own breathing and heartbeats. But here there was no human body, only pure consciousness. All he could feel was silence, an eternal, deathly stillness that seemed to last until the end of time. Li Tianlan did not panic. Instead, his consciousness became clearer and firmer. Unable to control anything, he let his consciousness continue to fall, quietly adapting to all this in the darkness. Until there was light in front of him. The light was slightly bright and warm. The moment it appeared, all the darkness retreated without any warning. Li Tianlan's consciousness was full of messy light and light bands. There seemed to be endless brilliance spreading unscrupulously in his field of vision, messy and without rules, like countless colorful scribbles. His perception of up and down began to become clear. The messy brilliance in front of him was entangled, with an indescribable sense of hierarchy. It was like heaven and earth. Li Tianlan looked at it silently. He could feel the blazing heat contained in these ribbons of light. They were like flames that could incinerate everything. They burned silently as if they would last for eternity. All of this was extremely clear and illusory, as if it was isolated. Li Tianlan did not feel the heat. All he could feel was warmth. His consciousness moved forward slowly in the light. All the light bands seemed to be gathering toward Li Tianlan, as if they wanted to merge with him. But there seemed to be a barrier between him and the light bands. The two sides were infinitely close, but they were in harmony. Li Tianlan did not know why he was here, nor did he know where he was. His consciousness kept moving forward uncontrollably in the light bands all over the sky. The light bands never changed. They seemed to be scattered everywhere in a very messy way, clear and bright, but with a fixed pattern. No matter how Li Tianlan moved forward, they did not change at all. For Li Tianlan vaguely noticed something. All of this was just because it was too far away. This distance seemed to be beyond his imagination, and they were far more magnificent than he looked. So no matter how he moved, their shape never changed at all. Li Tianlan never changed at all. Li Tianlan looked at the farthest light band seriously. The light band drew a long track above a piece of purity, like a scorching torrent filling the void. It was still, but at the same time it was boiling. At the end of his sight, A touch of darkness came over silently and slowly enveloped the light band. The darkness began to spread in the farthest place. 1,000 miles, 10,000 miles, a light year, all the distance was meaningless in his consciousness. The darkness crazily extended over, bringing with it an incomparably resplendent glimmer. All the light bands were swallowed by the darkness. Li Tianlan stood in the darkness again. This darkness was no longer dead silent. Specks of light floated around him in all directions and in the farthest place. It was like an incomparably vast starry sky. The dark but bright starry sky seemed to have spread to the limit the moment it touched his body. So the darkness began to shrink. The endless, densely packed stars began to extinguish. The starry light suddenly shattered in pieces, disappeared, and returned to nothingness. The darkness slowly disappeared with the broken stars, as if the whole starry sky was dying out. The darkness shrank faster and faster, and the space revealed its original appearance again. The light band floated as if it was eternal. It was indescribably magnificent, but with a touch of extreme desolation and dilapidation. Li Tianlan looked at this scene in a daze. A great sadness seemed to hit his heart completely in an instant, piercing through his soul. It was indescribable unwillingness and despair. His consciousness trembled, and he instinctively chased after the starry sky that was shrinking and dying out. The darkness closed in ahead. A large piece of colorful light band was left behind by him. It was like a never-ending chase. The darkness kept shrinking, and the distance between it and Li Tianlan was not shortened at all. Li Tianlan stopped. The darkness was still shrinking, but the distance between it and him did not widen as he stopped. The light band was still floating slowly around him. Li Tianlan looked ahead in a daze. That was a spot of light. It was a spot of light that survived after the darkness closed in and the starry sky died out. It was a fish that escaped the net. It was extremely lucky but also extremely sad. Li Tianlan looked at this spot of light and felt a little happy. He carefully wanted to reach out his hand, but as a consciousness he could not sense his arm at all. So his whole consciousness directly hit the faintly shining spot of light in front of him. The light band all over the sky disappeared. He once again crashed into the shrinking darkness. His consciousness shrank with the darkness, shrinking toward the starting point of the spreading darkness. There was a blue light there. It was virtual, shining with countless data. It was like a table, to be exact. It was a test bench. A beautiful woman with dazzling light all over her body was standing in front of the test bench, watching the dark starry sky with the test bench as the center shrink and expand again and again. Li Tianlan's consciousness suddenly shook. His consciousness made a sound for the first time. Little Bai. In front of the test bench, Qin Weibai suddenly looked back. The starry sky was shrinking like a light. Li Tianlan just wanted to say something. The darkness, the starry sky, the light band, everything completely dissipated. Li Tianlan abruptly opened his eyes and breathed rapidly. In front of him was Qin Weibai's bright eyes, which were still a little dazed. He turned his head subconsciously. Xinyuan Wuxiang was loosening his palm. The wounds on their bodies had completely healed. With surprise on his chubby face, he muttered to himself, "The first real interaction was successful, a very perfect success." Chapter 1066. Li Tianlan didn't hear Xinyuan Wuxiang's voice. The moment his consciousness returned to his body, he pressed his head instinctively. He didn't know how long he had been in that absolute silence. But the moment the shrinking starry sky and the light bands all over the sky disappeared, countless voices seemed to return at the same time. Li Tianlan felt as if there were millions or even more people talking in different languages, different contents, and different tones. All the voices were mixed together and suddenly became extremely chaotic. Blurred pictures appeared and disappeared with the voices. Li Tianlan began to feel familiar, but he couldn't see the content of the pictures at all. A lot of voices kept gathering in his ears. He seemed to be standing in the starry sky that had shrunk to the extreme and began to expand again. A blurry Qin Weibai stood in front of him. Her silhouette was so illusory that it seemed as if it could disappear at any moment. However, her entire body was emitting a hazy and dazzling light. Qin Weibai saw a divine wheel rise behind her. The divine wheels surrounded her silhouette. Each divine wheel carried a different scene. They turned into light and continued to merge with Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai's silhouette disappeared. In the end, she turned into a magnificent and majestic crown that was also extremely exquisite and gorgeous. This picture was completely fixed in Li Tianlan's mind. All the voices disappeared completely. The surroundings were quiet again. Li Tianlan, who was pale, wiped the cold sweat on his head and let out a long breath. Xinyuan Wushang had let go of his palm. The injuries they had suffered had healed. Li Tianlan froze for a moment and fell silent. Xinyuan Wushang took a step back and looked at Li Tianlan seriously. "Big brother, do you understand?" "Just now." Li Tianlan took a deep breath. "That's malice." Xinyuan Wushang said slowly, "It's just that the situation here is special. Big brother, you have a second heart now and sister-in-law is here. Otherwise I wouldn't dare to say anything. It's okay if you don't hear it. If you really hear it, we won't even know how we die." Li Tianlan was silent and subconsciously looked at Qin Weibai. Qin Weibai's face was slightly red. She shook her head slightly and then came to her senses. She said confusedly, "What happened just now? I feel a little dizzy." Li Tianlan was speechless for a moment. It was impossible for him to forget the injuries he and Xinyuan Wushang had suffered when they bore the malice of the world. If Xinyuan Wushang had not been there, he would have been at risk of dying from such injuries. But Qin Weibai only felt a little dizzy? Li Tianlan looked at Xinyuan Wushang and asked, "What's going on?" "It's probably because sister-in-law is special." Xinyuan Wushang smiled meaningfully. The malice of the world was indeed not something that Qin Weibai needed to worry about. To some extent, this person was equivalent to the physical projection of the Qin Weibai in the European continent. Xinyuan Wushang could never forget what he had experienced in the depths of Qin Weibai's consciousness. The scene, which was similar to the eternal furnace, was between reality and illusion, and was not affected by the world. Eternal furnace. To the spacetime corridor, it was a forbidden zone for the human race. At the same time, it was also a paradise for the human race. The most crucial transformation of every peak energy source of the human race was carried out in the eternal furnace. How did the human emperor of the human emperor palace and the god of war of the god of war's realm manage to leave the corridor of time and space? It was even allowed to cut off half of the miracle city? At that time, the two could not be regarded as masters among the top experts of the same level. Even now, Xinyuan Wushang could be sure that the two would not be a match for his father even if they joined forces. They could leave the spacetime corridor because they had gained a lot in the eternal furnace. These gains had turned into potential and even gave them the hope of catching up with his father. Qin Weibai's consciousness space was still far from the real eternal furnace, but it already had some characteristics. She could pass through the current miracle city in that space and reach the other half of the miracle city. This was enough to explain the problem. And the Qin Weibai in front of him, as the physical projection of that person, could not be affected by any malice. She just could not resist it. The specific situation was that when Li Tianlan received some information that might cause the malice of the world, Qin Weibai could not hear the content. If she wanted to really understand those things, she could only rely on the real interaction with Li Tianlan again and again. Li Tianlan was thinking quietly. After all, he was different from Wang Xingxiao. At least for many things he would not ask why or how he did it. Those things that seemed incomprehensible were easy to make people curious. But Li Tianlan knew that he could not figure it out in a short time. He was more concerned about his own strength. If you don't understand what's going on, then you don't understand. He only cared about what he and the people around him could do. Apart from that, he did not even care about Xinyuan Wushang's background. "What can you do?" Li Tianlan suddenly asked. Xinyuan Wushang was stunned. But obviously he was familiar with Li Tianlan's straightforwardness, so he said directly, "I'm a doctor. From now on, as long as I'm in Emperor Dong's palace, you don't have to worry about most of your injuries, big brother. My healing ability can even cover a large battlefield. So not only you, but also the soldiers of Emperor Dong's palace don't have to worry about getting hurt." Li Tianlan immediately thought of the incredible battle-loss ratio of East Island. He nodded and showed a trace of a smile. He looked at Xing Tian and asked, "What about him?" "His ability is a bit abstract. It's hard for me to give an example. He's a calligrapher. But big brother, you can use him as an invincible realm expert. Although he's not at the peak of the invincible realm, he's close." Xinyuan Wushang glanced at Xing Tian, who was still lying on the ground in a daze. Li Tianlan nodded and seemed to be thinking about something. "What else can you tell me?" he asked slowly. Xinyuan Wushang frowned, and his face gradually became cautious. "More things can only wait until you break through again. Only then can we work together to withstand stronger malice. Before that, the only thing I can say is that the current Emperor Dong's palace is not enough. It needs to expand. Big brother, you need a dynasty, a real dynasty." After a pause, Xinyuan Wushang said slowly, "For now, this is even the most important thing. It's overwhelming." Li Tianlan took a deep look at him. "In fact, the situation is very clear." Shenyuan Wushang continued, the Wang family of Beihai is very likely to cooperate with Lin Shi, and Jiang Shangyu will also cooperate with Li Guangtu. This is the current situation in the Dark World, and it will also be the main opponent of Emperor Dong's palace. Li Tianlan nodded and suddenly said, the family behind Lin Shi and the family behind you are enemies? A strange look flashed in Shenyuan Wushang's eyes. Enemies? He pondered for a moment and finally shook his head. Not really. Of course we can't be considered friends either. In fact, in most situations, we basically don't have any interaction with them. But if both sides need it, we will support each other. That's about it. In fact, when some crises rise to a certain level, the so-called grievances, hatred, and blood feuds are not important. We can help each other not because we are friends. The biggest reason is that we are human beings. We are human beings. That's all. I don't understand, Li Tianlan said blandly. Shenyuan Wushang smiled bitterly but didn't say much. Li Tianlan seemed to understand something and nodded. There was a sudden knock on the door. It was extremely urgent. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows slightly. Come in. The door was violently pushed open. Military counselor rushed in almost at full speed. He looked at Li Tianlan and Qin Weibai with a strange look in his eyes. What's going on? Li Tianlan asked with a frown. What's going on? What's going on? Military counselor murmured to himself and then smiled with relief. What's going on? I want to know too. Huh? Li Tianlan was a little confused. The plane is ready and so is the team. I can make other arrangements on the plane. Military counselor took a deep breath and said with a strange look in his eyes, in fact, I was already outside the door 10 minutes ago. Yes, 10 minutes ago. But I looked outside the door for a full 10 minutes, but I couldn't find the door of the small reception room. The whole small reception room seemed to suddenly disappear. Just now, when I turned around, the door of the small reception room suddenly appeared in front of me. Military counselor looked serious. Who can tell me what's going on? Chapter 1067. After a chaotic and bloody night, the sun rose and the sky was clear. The inside of East Island began to become extremely calm, and at the same time extremely chaotic. What was calm was the situation. What was chaotic was people's hearts. In the huge conference room, the extremely noisy voices had lasted for several hours. The discussion became a discussion, the discussion became a dispute, and the dispute became a quarrel. Everyone seemed to be speaking at the same time, and countless voices mixed together and became noise. No one could hear what others were saying. Everyone was scrambling to express their own opinions. Worried, radical, decadent, and self-deprecating. The conference room was filled with smoke, and the thick smoke filled every corner of the conference room like a thin cloud. The crowd, whose eyes were red because of choking, showed undisguised anxiety, and sweat flowed down their faces. Some people took off their coats and some people tore their ties. The roaring never stopped. Everyone was trying to say something, and there was a touch of anger and fear deep in everyone's eyes that couldn't be concealed. I just received the news that Wooden Island sect was destroyed 2 hours ago. It was Li Badian who did it. One person, only him. He destroyed Wooden Island sect alone. A rough voice suddenly rang out in the midst of all the noise. The atmosphere in the whole conference room suddenly quieted down for a moment. Wooden Island sect. Everyone present was familiar with this sect. Although East Island was small, it had never been weak in martial arts. The development of martial arts was extremely prosperous, and all kinds of sects could be found all over the territory. A few years ago, East Island had 3 invincible realm experts. The 3 heads of Wuji Palace, Liuhua Palace, and Jifeng Sword Training School were also known as the 3 Grandmasters of East Island. Even some superpowers couldn't get 3 invincible realm experts. If you only looked at the number of people and not the specific strength, a few years ago, the number of invincible realm experts in Zhongzhou State was only 1 more than that in East Island. Perhaps because of the system of East Island, they had always attached great importance to the development of martial arts and the right to speak in the dark world. In addition to the 3 superpowers, various martial arts sects would also get different resources and support. Among them, Wooden Island sect was a relatively powerful martial arts sect. Although there had never been an invincible realm expert since its establishment, the leader of each generation was at least at the peak of the Thundershocking realm. In addition to the leader, Wooden Island sect could always maintain a lineup of about 3 to 5 Thundershocking realm experts. With such strength, except for forces such as Jifeng Sword Training School, Wuji Palace and Liuhua Palace, it could be regarded as a first-class martial arts sect in the whole East Island. And the most special thing was the location of Wooden Island sect. This was the closest martial arts sect to Heaven Capital. The elimination of Wooden Island sect meant that the power of Emperor Dong's palace had officially spread to the vicinity of Heaven Capital. Is there only Liuhua Palace? A middle-aged man in East Island, who was already a little bald, muttered to himself. Liuhua Palace. My Shiranui, that bitch. She's a bitch. What can she do? What else can she do? The roar came from the conference room again. Everyone's face was full of excitement. Liuhua Palace used to be the oldest martial arts force in East Island, and it was also the martial arts force that declined the fastest in recent years. But to some extent, they could also be regarded as the most prosperous martial arts force in East Island in recent years. The palace master of Liuhua Palace, Shinichi Miyamoto of the Invincible Realm, died in the hands of tribulation in the final battle of Heaven Capital. They who had lost the Invincible Realm did not become weak to some extent, because they had a very smart young palace master. Mai Shiranui, who was known as the young heavenly son of East Island. Her strength might be nothing at the beginning, but she was the first person to turn to the Purgatory of Heaven Capital after it appeared in East Island. The Purgatory of Heaven Capital took root in East Island. First, it supported Mai Shiranui to the position of the palace master of Liuhua Palace. Then it began to devour the interests of Liuhua Palace. And Mai Shiranui began to integrate the large and small sects in East Island with the support of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. Li Kuangtu had never returned to East Island since the chaos in Snow Country. The power of the Purgatory of Heaven Capital in East Island was constantly weakening. In the process, Liuhua Palace was naturally suppressed. But Mai Shiranui was no longer the same Mai Shiranui. Facing the suppression from all sides, she gave up a lot of interests and weakened the connection with the Purgatory of Heaven Capital. During the 2 years when the Purgatory of Heaven Capital left East Island, Mai Shiranui compromised a lot, but the basic structure of Liuhua Palace was preserved. The connection between her and the Purgatory of Heaven Capital was almost non-existent. Now the whole Heaven Capital seemed to have become the foundation of Liuhua Palace. Mai Shiranui was indeed not a simple woman. But now she was only close to the strength of the half-step Invincible Realm. How could she defend Heaven Capital in the face of the aggressive Emperor Dong's palace? A cruel reality had been put in front of everyone. In one night, Situ Tsangyue and Saint swept the headquarters of Jifeng Sword Raining School and Wuji Palace. But other experts of Emperor Dong's palace were not idle either. Lin Yuxian, Li Beidian, Bai Yuming, Du Hanin, Su Chu. These young people who had begun to grow up and were famous in the Dark World now all entered East Island. 2 Invincible Realm experts fought against the 2 biggest martial arts forces in East Island. And these young experts did not stop for a moment and swept all the famous martial arts schools in East Island. They made full use of the time of one night. With the destruction of Wooden Island School by Li Beidian, the only martial arts school that could be said to have a deep foundation in the whole East Island was Liuhua Palace in Heaven Capital. Attack. We must attack. Teach Emperor Dong's palace a lesson and let them know that this is East Island. Order Mai Shiranui to block Emperor Dong's palace. Mai Shiranui has long betrayed East Island. There are many other schools. Are we going to use the army? Everyone roared at the same time. No one listened to what others said at all. They just raised their voices as much as possible to let others hear their opinions. There were not many people in the conference room. There were less than 20 people speaking at this time. But in the noise, the whole conference room was as chaotic as a vegetable market. The door of the conference room was slowly pushed open in the noise. A short middle-aged man faced the smoke coming at his face. He held his breath for a moment and then coughed violently. The smoke drifted along the open door of the conference room along with the noise. The middle-aged man coughed for a while, but no one noticed his arrival. He gasped and his face was red. When he finally came to his senses and saw the messy scene in front of him, his red face suddenly turned livid. Bastard! Be quiet. Be quiet, all of you. The middle-aged man was short, but his voice was extremely loud. His voice kept echoing in the conference room, suppressing all the noise. Everyone in the conference room focused on the middle-aged man. All the noise suddenly disappeared. In the sudden silence, a man in a military uniform stood up and slightly bowed to the middle-aged man. Your Excellency, Prince Jing. Everyone stood up and slightly bowed respectfully. In East Island, the special warfare system had always been the exclusive domain of the royal family. Even the cabinet couldn't intervene. The royal family had absolute leadership over the special warfare system, which was also the greatest power in their hands. The 20 people in the conference room could be said to be the real high level of the special warfare system of East Island. They were all loyal to the royal family. Although Prince Jing was not the crown prince, He was also one of the most valued people by the royal family. He was also the most popular person for the crown prince. No matter how angry the high-level people were, they couldn't help but change their attitude in front of him. How long do you want to quarrel? The livid Prince Jing didn't sit down. He stood there and looked at the people in the conference room with a livid face. The middle-aged soldier who stood up first hesitated and said in a low voice, "Your Excellency, we are still discussing countermeasures." Prince Jing's body flashed. In the clear sound, he slapped the middle-aged soldier hard in the face. The next second he suddenly roared, "Trash. You're all trash. What countermeasures are you discussing? The martial arts sects of East Island are almost all killed, and you are still discussing countermeasures here? When you have a solution, let alone martial arts sects, will there still be East Island in this world? Say something." The middle-aged soldier's body was slapped and turned 360 degrees on the spot. He covered his face tightly and said in a deep voice, "We still have Liuhua Palace. We can order my Shiranui to temporarily stall Emperor Dong's palace and then we..." Smack! Prince slapped him on the left side of his face again. As his body was spinning, Prince's extremely cold voice sounded, "There is no more. My Shiranui betrayed East Island. Now Situ Tsangyue and Saint have arrived in Heaven Capital and are guests at the headquarters of Liuhua Palace. My Shiranui invited them personally. From now on there is no Liuhua Palace in East Island, no more. We still have other sects." Another person stood up. Prince's cold eyes glanced over and found that it was the intelligence minister of the Special Warfare System of East Island. "Other sects?" Prince's voice suddenly calmed down. Maybe because of despair his heart was dead. "Other sects such as? Can you tell me one that I've heard of?" The intelligence minister paused slightly. The sects that Prince Jing had heard of had been completely wiped out last night. There were many martial arts sects in East Island now. But compared with those famous ones, the rest of the martial arts sects were like cats and dogs. At least in the eyes of Emperor Dong's palace, they didn't care about those sects at all. "Your Highness, although the other martial arts schools are not famous, they are also a force. If they can be integrated, they can play a great role. Together with our soldiers and weapons, we can fight with Emperor Dong's palace," said Yi Futian. The intelligence minister gritted his teeth and said. The prince moved his body as if he wanted to slap the minister of intelligence, but he had already raised his hand. In the end, he let out a long sigh and fell into the chair closest to him. "What's the use of integrating those sects? How many Thundershocking Realm experts can there be in all of them? Can there be more than 5? You still talk about the army and weapons? Weapons? This is East Island. Do you dare to use those weapons that threaten Emperor Dong's palace? Who dares to use them? Soldiers? The cabinet is more lively than here now. Who can mobilize soldiers except those bastards?" The intelligence minister wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and didn't say anything. "I need the specific situation of the special warfare system." Prince Jing was silent for a while and suddenly said. The intelligence minister opened his mouth, hesitated, and finally smiled bitterly. "Your Excellency Prince, there is no special warfare system anymore. Emperor Dong's palace has almost wiped out all our high-end martial arts forces. I just did the statistics. At present, there are still 42 martial arts sects in East Island. Among them, there are 2 superiors at the peak of the Thundershocking Realm and 5 superiors of the Thundershocking Realm. This is the high-end force in the special warfare system today." While he was talking, his phone suddenly vibrated. The intelligence minister took out his phone and looked down at it. His face suddenly became even more gloomy. "I take back what I just said. The 2 superiors at the peak of the Thundershocking Realm from the Judao Integration Sect and the Flowing Water Sword Sect were killed half an hour ago." The conference room became more and more silent. Prince Jing slumped in the chair numbly and didn't say a word for a long time. "We immediately asked the cabinet to attack. Kill them." Another high-level official suddenly stood up and roared. "Do you think the cabinet is better off than us?" Prince Jing said numbly, "We lost 3 fleets overnight, all of which fell into the hands of the Border Control Corps of Jianghu State, including the giant whale. All the weapon systems of East Island got out of control not long ago, but all the operation permissions are in chaos. They are completely rewritten into a mess. The most important thing for the cabinet now is to mobilize the army to fill the gaps of the 3 fleets. How can they have the energy to deal with Emperor Dong's palace?" There was a dead silence. In the conference room, Prince Jing sighed. The most important power of the imperial family was concentrated in the special warfare system. But overnight, the entire special warfare system was almost completely destroyed by Emperor Dong's palace. All the power of the imperial family was completely evaporated, and there was no hope of a comeback in a short time. Everyone present knew what this meant. The influence of the imperial family was greatly weakened. Even these people here had become commanders without an army. East Island would also lose the right to speak in the Dark World. Their every move might even appear in the sight of Emperor Dong's palace in the future. East Island still belonged to the people of East Island, but from today on, it was also the East Island of Emperor Dong's palace. Maybe, we can talk to Li Tianlan? The Minister of Intelligence said hesitantly. Are you crazy? Li Tianlan is different from Li Guangtu. He's from Zhongzhou State. From Zhongzhou State? Are you sure? The Minister of Intelligence sneered. Emperor Dong's palace is in Tianan now. Enough. Prince Jing said with a gloomy face. Shut up, all of you. Father has decided to visit His Majesty Li Tianlan in Tianan in 3 days. The conference room suddenly became dead silent. Everyone looked at Prince Jing in a daze, and their faces were full of disbelief. The corner of Prince Jing's mouth twitched, and his heart was full of bitterness. Are we going to cooperate with Emperor Dong's palace? The middle-aged soldier who was slapped twice looked angry and unwilling. Cooperation? The prince smiled bitterly. To be exact, this was just the current unilateral wish of the imperial family. In this matter, the imperial family was unprecedentedly calm, so they were very clear about the current situation. It was completely unstoppable for Emperor Dong's palace to enter East Island and occupy the dark world of East Island. Yagyu Kurasumi and Tianhai Wuji died in Beihai at the same time. The two martial arts sects were swept away, and all the powerful martial arts forces were also swept away. The entire East Island was in an unprecedentedly weak state in terms of experts. It would take at least a generation or even longer for martial arts of East Island to recover. In this final battle in Beihai, the military also suffered heavy losses. The most important thing was that until now, East Island still didn't know what happened last night. What they found out was that all the weapon control systems were stuffed with a lot of garbled codes. Communication. As for communication, until now, no one could even say for sure what went wrong with the communication last night. Because in everyone's view, the communication last night was very normal. The general headquarters could contact any department, any fleet, and even any small fleet unit. There was no problem with the reports, commands, and feedback of each department. What they saw was also very real. There was no abnormality in the communication between the various departments, but it silently covered up all the truth. No one knew what was going on. Without knowing this, East Island didn't dare to do anything. If such a method were to be used again, no one dared to imagine what the consequences would be. So at this stage, the entire East Island would be in a state of careful defense, and the cabinet didn't dare to support the royals. The right to speak in the dark world? No matter how reluctant they were, they had to give it up now. In the following time, Emperor Dong's palace could be said to be almost unbridled in East Island, and they didn't need to worry about anything. The royals couldn't stop all this. So the only thing they could think of was cooperation. This was their unilateral wish. In fact, before Prince Jing came, he had received the notice from the royals. His father contacted Emperor Dong's palace in person and successfully communicated with Li Tianlan. He sincerely invited His Majesty Emperor Dong to East Island for a talk. But the result wasn't good. Because from beginning to end, Li Tianlan only said 4 words. I don't have time. The phone was hung up directly. The royals didn't dare to call again. The purpose of Prince Jing's visit now was to keep an eye on the senior members of the special warfare system of East Island, so that these idiots wouldn't do anything radical. To be exact, he didn't want them to figure out how to deal with Emperor Dong's palace. Now, it's time for us to show our sincerity, Prince Jing said blandly. He didn't say that Emperor Dong's palace didn't care about the so-called cooperation, and no one knew whether the cooperation would succeed or not. But since the other party had shown their attitude, the royals had to show their sincerity unless they fell out with them. As for falling out with them, how could they do that now? Everyone's face twisted when they heard this. Sincerity? How could they show their sincerity when the other party had already fought in front of them? Should they close their eyes and turn a blind eye? A bad-tempered special warfare general shouted this directly. Turn a blind eye? Prince Jing sneered. If you just turn a blind eye, what kind of sincerity is that? The royals hope that everyone here can show their sincerity. They hope that you can send a few representatives to cooperate with Emperor Dong's palace. I know you're not willing. In fact, no one is willing. But before we have the power to regain the right to speak in the dark world, I don't want anyone to do anything stupid. Do you understand what I mean? Silence. It was almost dead silent. In the smoke-filled conference room, everyone's faces were flushed with anger and unwillingness. Most people's faces were even turning purple from holding back their anger. But no one spoke. It wasn't that they didn't want to say it. They just didn't know what to say. "That's all I want to say," Prince Jing said blandly. "We need to send 2 representatives to cooperate with Emperor Dong's palace. Everyone who wants to go." You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.